on the channel too. I really appreciate, like, I've been having a lot of fun having guests on here and just having a good time and stuff. We are live, but you know, to me, I'm like, hey, what's up? You know, we'll just continue the conversation. Hi, everybody. My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. I am getting situated with my good friend Dash Glitch over here. Dude, thank you so much for joining me today. Yeah, man, I think I'm just thrilled, really, to be honest. I am trying to think about how I even found you or how you found me, but we kind of what happened here? We kind of just like had a quick conversation and we were like, hey, it'd be cool if you came on the channel, and I'm so glad that you decided to be my guest, dude. How is everything?
Good, yeah, good. I think it's one of those things where like, where you gravitate in the same circles, and then it's kind of like, you're bound to, at some point in your orbit, you're bound to kind of like line up with other individuals that are also doing a similar thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I guess it's similar to like music in general, and not just music on YouTube. You know.
yeah,
Um, because also like a lot of the time, maybe also like DJing and stuff like that, like we're looking for new tracks or we're looking for new ideas, and we go out looking in the places that we're comfortable with, you know, and
yeah,
that often leads
absolutely.
us to, like, for example, like discover your channel and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally apologize. I was definitely listening. I was just kind of setting everything up to make sure that things are good. So I have chat over here. That way it's not interfering with the stream. Oogly, Steels, Chris, um, all say hello. I talk about you quite a bit on my channel. Not like, you know, in a crazy way or anything, but just in the sense that, you know, formalities aside, you're somebody that has been on YouTube forever, and you actually use all the same tools that I do, and I believe that you've actually been using them longer than me. Hey, Aragon. So we actually had a quick discussion before we actually got on the call, and I was talking about, like, you know, just like he gave me a shout out on a video, which thank you so much for that, by the way. But I was like, yeah, you know, don't worry about copying ideas, blah blah blah. And I said something about Bitwig, and he was like, you know, I'm the first person on YouTube to put a video up about Bitwig, right? And he sends me this video, and it's literally from like almost 10 years ago, which leads me into my first question. Like, I what what is it like being like, you've been doing YouTube for almost a decade now, right?
Well, so it's kind of difficult to say because like back then I wasn't really doing YouTube, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of more working in the music industry. I was working in a music store at the time, and as well as doing like side stuff like mixing and mastering and that kind of thing. And one of the distributors for some of the other brands, synth brands at the time, actually got the distribution agency for Bitwig locally, and they were like, "Hey, we've got this new software that's going to launch." It was a beta for Bitwig 1, I think.
Wow.
Um,
That's
and they were
crazy.
like, "Do you want to try it out?" And I thought, you know, this is a great opportunity to like record it and stuff. And so I just did that and put it up, but didn't edit anything and stuff like that. So I did a couple of videos back then, but they never really gained traction because I never really put thought into it. It was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do this thing, film
Yeah.
myself doing it and that kind of thing. And so like that first kind of, I think 6 years or so, um, nothing really happened. And then I actually quit my job and had a lot more time on my hands. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And just, you know, took the dive and
Yeah.
went full force. And from there, I actually consider like, okay, now I'm doing it because I'd removed all of the videos that I'd done before that because a lot of them were pretty bad and pretty uninformed, um, and that kind of thing. You know, as I say, I didn't really put much effort into it. It was just like, here's a screen capture of me messing around in a software that I've just opened for the first time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But looking back at it, like a lot of YouTube is still that.
Right. That's like exactly what they do, right? And I wonder if they'll be smart enough. Well, I hope that they keep it, because like there is something to be said of like leaving your legacy on YouTube. So, you know, there's that aspect of it. But maybe unlist the video or something. The union was bound to happen. Love you both. Big ups, Goga. Thank you so much, dude. Hey, Dreamer. Hey, hey. That's really interesting, though, and it just leads me to have like a billion more questions, and I'm glad that we kind of just have a place to jump off of because I'm really curious to know um, so many things about like I want to know. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and then we'll kind of dive off into them if that's okay with you. But I want to know about your experience of like how YouTube has changed in the past 10 years, how your production has changed in the past 10 years, especially because you're both a hardware and a software guy. I'm really curious as to what you're doing right now in the South African scene and the irony of that the fact that like the people that I recently started getting into contact with, you actually like don't live too far away from, meaning like Aiden and Cage, and hopefully you got in contact with Zane Wolf as well. But man, like it's just that's so freaking cool that things just kind of came together in that way. Before I ask any of that, though, for people that might not know who you are, especially from my channel, can you tell us a little bit about your music? You just dropped an album. Um, I'm kind of curious as to how you even got started with all of that in the first place, you know, because I know that you didn't just buy all that stuff behind you at once, right? It was like, you know, an accumulation
No,
of
yeah,
time.
definitely not. Yeah.
Hey, Kitty.
So I guess it's a very large topic. So are you wanting to know like how I got into music in general, or
Yeah, maybe just you know, as much as it's as possible, not as possible, because I'm, you know, I want you to tell us as much as you want to say, but you know, you're somebody that has been doing music most likely way longer than I have. You're also somebody that has an incredible wealth of knowledge, both in the software and hardware gear, but you also like kind of pinpoint like Psytrance is your main stick, right? Like that's like your core. I know you do other stuff, but I'm kind of curious as to like how that came about and maybe even, you know, why you chose Psytrance or what about Psytrance that you like, right? Because that might be unfair about like why do you make this? It doesn't matter, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting story. I just like, I guess my question was like how far down the rabbit hole are we going? You know?
Yeah. Well, as far
Um,
as you want to go.
so um, so both my parents are creatives. My mom is an art teacher,
Sick.
and my dad is a musician. So I grew up
Damn.
with like in a creative household where there was a lot of musical influence, and also a bit more kind of on the uh, creative side of things, just all around, you know. So um, from my mom's side, I got a lot of uh, let's say inspiration in terms of like teaching and that kind of stuff. But then from my dad's side, like he was in bands and that kind of thing, so I had access to equipment at a very young age, and I kind of started tinkering a little bit. Um, I think the first kind of musical thing I remember is playing around, except obviously on like a piano, because we had like a piano around the house, and I used to tinker a bit on that as well. But I never really enjoyed it too much because it was just like, this is the sound, now you have to use it. But my dad one day brought home a Korg MS-10 from their studio. One of the musicians in the band had like started experimenting with synthesizers, and I like started playing with this thing, and the sounds that it was making were out of this world. I absolutely loved it, just because it was kind of so strange, and I think I had that influence of more of the creative side of things where I wanted to explore the more avant-garde, you know, and that kind of stuff. So I was always hooked on that, the sound of synthesizers. But when I listened to music, it was very tough to like associate synthesizers with normal music, because at the time it was like rock or hip hop, or do you know what I mean?
Can I like just give you a quick example of that? So
Yeah,
uh, not to interrupt you, but something that I actually, the reason why that struck a chord with me so hard is because I was literally playing piano today, trying to write or come up with like halftime-esque melodies, right? It's things that are incredibly electronic, and I could not do it. I was only able to like hear the piano making contemporary, you know, classical styles of things. And that's a really, really interesting point, and I'm glad that I'm not the only person that had felt that. It's almost like, depending on the technology that you access, it almost draws you towards that specific kind of like music, right? Has that been kind of, is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, obviously, because there was, I had access to some really rudimentary, like, recording equipment and stuff at the time, and I had the piano and also, like, some drums and guitars around the house. Like, I tried to, like, produce things, but it always, like, and record live onto tape and then play the drum.
Yeah.
But then it always got to the point where I was like, I have a vision for sounds, and these sounds can't achieve that.
Yeah,
Do you know
they're
what I
not
mean? And then I touched this MS-10, and it was like, wee, wee, wah, 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 and I was like,
Yeah.
there it is.
Right.
But then at the time, it was like contemporary music was a certain way, and then there was all these weird sounds that I wanted to make, and they just didn't gel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like in bands and stuff, just kind of to fulfill the musical side of things. But I still had this kind of idea that there must be a meaning for these weird sounds that can come out of a synth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you learn to play like a bunch of different instruments? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just, but do you know how to play several different instruments?
Yeah, so I can play drums a little bit. Well, yeah, I played drums for several years. I played in a few bands and stuff. I can play a little bit of piano, but nothing just off the top of my head. It's more just like, play some chords
Finding
here and
things.
there. And I can play a little bit of guitar, but I mean, I've seen you play, so I wouldn't say I'm anywhere near like your level of guitar. I would say like my speciality on that side of things is drums, but it's still, as soon as I got into synths, I just kind of forgot all of that because it was meaningless because I could just do that. You know what I mean? Like I had a vision for music. I can put it in with the computer. The rest is kind of history,
Yeah, absolutely.
I no longer need to like bargain with the band members. Like, please, can't we do this? Like, don't you want to try this? And like, you know what I mean, it was just like control freak time.
Well, I mean, even still though, it's hard because I definitely think there is something to be said about serving a higher purpose, something bigger than yourself when it comes to, well, anything, right? Whether it comes to service or, charity, well-being, giving, even something creative. But the artist is very selfish on the inside, and I think that's true for everybody to some extent, and you have to find that for yourself to even know how to, in some cases, figure out what you can contribute, and I totally get that. It is interesting though, like when you say that, because like I wonder like what your thought process of, and I wonder if you had any hurdles of letting go of the drumming aspect of that for something that is a little bit more straightforward, such as Psytrance, right? It's not to say that you can't do complex drum patterns within Psytrance, but because it is a 4/4, right? Because it usually has a constant beat, I find that like, would you say or agree or disagree that it is a little bit more limiting on what you can do?
Yeah, I think yes, in terms of the drum sounds,
Mm-hmm.
but when you break it down into like the rudimentary elements of like what makes up music, like you don't necessarily have to trigger a snare on a flam pattern. You could do it with an FM synth,
That's
and
what I was going
often
next.
with Psytrance, it's like the backbeat is the same. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the big realization that I had when I first heard it on like a good system, because I'd always, when listening to Psytrance with just like either bad headphones or like shitty computer speakers or whatever, you only really hear that backbeat. You don't hear all the intricacies and stuff and the layers.
Right.
And when you hear that, like coming at it from a musician's point of view, I listened to it and I was like, this beat is kind of boring, and then I never got into Psytrance for a couple of years until like I heard it on a really good quality festival system, and I didn't even notice the beat. I was just listening to all the other little intricate sounds, and that's when I realized like, okay, you can do things like using the knowledge that you have, for example, on like a drum pattern to adapt like that pattern to like a lead line or something like that.
Syncopation with synths, right? And I'm so glad that you mentioned that because through that, and that wasn't a setup by any means, but I knew that you would know what I was like talking about when it came to that, right? But I love the idea about the freedom of electronic music doesn't have to necessarily assign that instrument to fill another instrument's, or to fill that instrument's role. So what I mean by that is exactly what you said. Like, you don't have to use drums to fulfill the drum role. You can use synths or things that are percussive in that way. And I think that's part of the awesome imagination that you have with that. Aside from something that I noticed, which I am the first to tell you, like, I love your fucking mixes. You have the best mixes of any producer that I know. That being said, I am interested to like pick into your imagination about how you think about rhythm and why, or maybe like if there is a methodology or a philosophy behind the instrumentation that you choose and like what draws you to those kinds of sounds.
Yeah. So it's actually an interesting question, and I think it's quite context dependent because obviously, when I approach it very differently when I'm making psytrance as opposed to when I'm making any other type of genre. And I think it's if you look at like what's the term, the etymology of the word.
Mm-hmm.
The word trance is like a state in which you achieve via repetitive whatever it is, repetitive movements, repetitive dance,
Chance,
repetitive
right?
rhythms or chants or whatever it is. And it's this repetitive sort of motion in the sub frequencies, which when heard on a proper system can actually put one into a higher state of consciousness. And this is something that I didn't really when listening on like shitty computer speakers, you don't hear the full aspect. You don't hear all the frequencies like they're supposed to be mixed and stuff. And it's probably also testament to why I'm a little bit more picky than other people in terms of the quality of the mix, is because that's also very much an important part of, I think, the psytrance or the psychedelic aspect of psytrance. So for me, the trance part of the genre denotes me needing to have a certain repetition. Every bass note needs to be phase re-triggered and it needs to be sample accurate the same.
Yeah.
Whereas in Euro, it's the opposite. You want every bass note to be like
Unique, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, as much as possible, but
Yeah, but that's because it's kind of part of the genre. It's makes the brain think, and it's ear candy for the mix, I guess.
yeah,
Whereas with Psytrance, it's everything else that you want the ear candy to be.
yeah.
So for me, like when I come at it, I'm like always thinking about making, like, I guess you could say the kick and bass and stuff as plain as possible, but you still put a lot of work into making it sound very plain and very clean. And then I
Yeah.
spend all the time that one would do designing, like you would do designing a bass, but then designing all the other sounds in the mix. Does that make sense?
It's interesting because for one, that piece of advice or that you just gave to everybody regarding phase triggering and stuff is actually something that you gave to me and is in fact very applicable to the genre that I'm doing. And like I think it's also important to note that like I can't speak on the same level of neuro as you are on trance, because even though I spend all my time doing neurobase, I am still learning so much and figuring out so much. Like yesterday I had a really long winded conversation with chat about why specific neurobases and stuff work and whatever, but it's really interesting to hear your point of the contextualization about how you phrase your relationship with your sub and your drums based off of what it is that you're trying to achieve and why a clean mix matters. But taking that advice, not that I'm trying to get into teaching mode or anything, but taking that advice is definitely helpful for somebody like me and people that are trying to have a clean low end or have a clean relationship with those things, because that is what helps make the groove easiest to identify. Because if you're smearing transients and you're smearing just notes all over itself, then it becomes more sloppy, and there's a time and place for it. But I think that having that distinction is a piece of electronic music that I don't think enough people talk about. So this is why I like having these conversations. In that aspect, though, it does kind of make me wonder, like, how do you balance, because I've listened to your entire album or your entire EP that you recently released, but how do you think about maintaining that balance of having variation versus keeping people in that state of trance? Is that something that you think of as the narration, or is it just something that you're like, okay, it feels right now, I'm going to move on into something else or introduce a new element?
Okay, so the interesting thing is that my most recent album is kind of more along the lines of what would be considered progressive trance, and progressive subgenre generally denotes slightly less of that repetition
Hmm.
and slightly more focus on a groove and maybe contrast of that repetition. And I used a lot of that in the album. So, for example, like if you listen to like some of the first tracks in the album, there isn't that repetition of the bass. And in fact, some of the bass notes aren't phase re-triggered because I did want to get a bit of groove going, and that kind of thing. But as the album progresses more towards the more traditional side of psytrance, you can actually hear things start to clean up in the low end and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there are some parts of the album which have the like complete contrast where it goes from one part where it's like a bit of a groovy bass into something that's slightly more quantized and regimented. But I feel like it helps to push that point across. Like, okay, now it's time for serious trance, and okay, now we can like groove a little bit and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I guess it is part of the storytelling as well, you know.
Yeah. If it's okay to ask, I I haven't listened to it enough times to be able to identify, but was this in some sort of sense, um, I mean, you kind of gave it to me on a maybe on a more minute scale. Maybe that's not the main thing, or maybe it was. But I'm wondering if like this was some kind of concept album or some kind of thing, or obviously every album has a title, every track has a song, and I'm curious to know if there's any significance behind that. Because usually when I name tracks, I'm just like August 26th, bullshit day, ASDF, ASDF, and then eventually I'm like, oh, it's something else.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There is a bit of a story behind even like the title of the album. It's called Carving Grooves, and it's kind of like a play on, actually carving grooves into a piece of wood,
Hmm.
as
Like
well
whittling.
as,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, as well as like spending the time to get that groove, like producing a track. Like you sit and you like go at that piece of wood over and over again until the groove is perfect. It's kind of the same as like whittling a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Um, and the idea of the album is very much like a kind of fusion of organic sounds and electronic sounds. And like I had this kind of concept in mind when I was writing a lot of the tracks, where I wanted to have um, this kind of fusion between organic and electronic. But I didn't quite have the title of the album until like only about halfway through the whole process, and then I was like, okay, now it's starting to come together.
Yeah.
But I guess you really have to like put yourself into the zone to be able to like come up with like ideas that stick.
Yeah, a long time ago, I put out a video about like how to plan a tune in the sense of story writing, and that was something that I got from Hudson Lee, and because he was just talking to me about like mood boarding and developing and planning this entire feel out and planning tracks around that stuff, and it's a lot of fun to do, but it's also like an incredible amount to like come up with the story as a narrative and then go and rewrite the story in terms of music and then supply all of the other kinds of media when you're ready to like release it and stuff, and it's definitely like rewarding, but I have kind of like personally gotten myself into this zone of just writing tunes, and to try to maintain that, I've almost let go of a lot of that stuff just to continue pushing forward for writing music. And I'm kind of curious, like for one, how long have you been writing music? And two, do you, as far as you are into production, do you still get stuck, or are you kind of just like I got it, or do you have a formula that you use, and not a formula of like you write the same tune every time, but as in a sense of like I have objectives and I know what it takes to go from zero to completion, or at least get to a point where I have a skeleton.
Well, just going back to like the previous thing that you were saying, like sometimes, like I get it, like sometimes creating a mood board can paint you too much into a corner and stuff, but it's also important to remember that none of that stuff is really important. What's important is the final music.
Right.
It's that stuff can just be like help with your trajectory in
A
terms of
guide.
that
Yeah.
creativity, to put you into the zone, to start thinking about new ideas and stuff like that. So like for me, I definitely had an idea. Like I was thinking, like even the first few tracks are named like underwater things, and like I had this idea in mind that like I wanted the listener to like travel through this like underwater world, and then I think track 3 is called Machines, and that's where things start getting a little bit more mechanical and electronic. And I was thinking
dope.
like then the less of the organic elements are mixed in there, and it starts to kind of like now we're coming out of this underwater world and that kind of thing. So I had this whole idea of the storyboard in mind, but I didn't necessarily have to stick to it at the end of the day. Like some tracks still moved around to fit the narrative, like in terms of the music as opposed to the story. Because I mean, if we get too attached to the story, a lot of people that are listening to the music aren't going to relate to the actual story because they don't understand.
Right.
You know, they're just listening to the beat at the end of the day. You know, and DJs, when they're playing the track, they're just playing a single track, not even the whole track nowadays. You know, they'll just play a few seconds of it, then mix to the next one. You know.
Yeah, I have a thought about that, but an analogy that I think about whenever we talk about this is like Super Mario, right? The goal of Super Mario is to save Princess Peach, but you might find him for whatever fucking reason in a spaceship, underwater, in the desert, you know, in a snowland, whatever. And I know that like it's easiest to relate to location and stuff, but in the matter of the narrative doesn't necessarily have to be 100% in that person's relative proximity and go through a linear progression. It can, you know, kind of jump around into all different kinds of places, and some people do that through even changing the genre or the tempo mid-song. And that's kind of interesting how you explain like how there are those micro things and how there is a dynamic narrative to the tunes that you create. And it makes it so much more fun because now whenever all of us go back and we re-listen to your music, we're going to be thinking, oh, well, what part is that? And I want to go back and identify that. I want to go back and try to like, you know, maybe see what your story was, but now I want to make my own story out of it because I'm listening within my own imagination. And that's what I love about this stuff, and that's what I love about music in general. But tangent. In any case, I was going to ask you something. Did I already ask you the question?
I feel like I've forgotten like 3 or 10 questions that you've asked along the way.
I know. It's gonna
I kind of
happen.
get like fixated on something.
Yeah, and I'm not too worried about like staying so on task. It's more to just like maintain the idea about continuing and just letting the conversation bloom in itself. But I guess something that I was going to ask you was, here's a good question. So Psytrance, right? That's like your, you know, that's your thing. If somebody were to listen to your music and put them in a trance, right? Where would you want them to go?
It's so the thing is that like it's the psychedelic experience is very much like a subconscious personal experience. So it's one of those things where like some people it might take some people to dark places, and it might take people to good places. But I think that it's like sometimes, you know, rinsing the psyche is a good thing because it kind of makes one more comfortable with the subconscious and stuff like that. So I guess it's more just about connecting. It's just about getting into a trance and connecting with the self, I guess.
So
and just dancing a little bit.
Yeah, of course, that's always included, right? Especially with I guess like your aesthetic. But I guess would it be safe to say that it's more about getting to there and then letting them go off, as opposed to trying to make them feel something specific? And that kind of that kind of coincides with the idea about, you know, what I just said about making up your own story and all that other stuff as well. But I always do like to ask those kinds of questions and stuff because I don't know about you, but I think with most people that make electronic music, or at least music that doesn't have words, because there is this natural unspoken idea about interpretation, I always wonder what artists want their fans or listeners to take away from their music.
Yeah, it's that is, I guess, the golden question. And I think the most important way to understand that, it's something that can't really be explained, but I think the most important, way to understand that is through performance. and actually connecting with people, like while they're listening to your music, whether it's in a performance state or whether it's while you're live streaming on YouTube or whatever the case is. I feel like it's that connection which allows one to understand how music can change people's perception or mind or do whatever it does, because if you like playing a song and you're watching a crowd, you can see how people are reacting to every beat or to every sound. On a physical level, it allows you to know what to either do or not do, but also like it allows you to understand just like how people relate to certain things, even just like, outside of the production,
My partner, she's a classically trained composer, and something that she talks with her mentor about is whether or not like specific sounds and stuff like can evoke a specific, like if there's a specific like frequency or sound or whatever that can evoke a specific emotion. And I've heard both sides of the story. I kind of sit somewhere in the middle, but I'm kind of curious as to if you have any thoughts about that. A quick example would be, some people think that, incredibly loud noises often are what triggers fear, right? Because it's unexpected, it's sudden, and blah, blah, blah. But I'm wondering if you think there's anything to, this chord means you're going to feel sad, Boom, you're sad, you're depressed.
I think music is a lot more complex than that nowadays. I think, there's a little bit of that, a little bit of aspect in terms of the theory side of like, this chord is going to make you feel sad and this is going to do this. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about the contrast of where that chord is in the entirety of the piece, For example, is if you have like a long major pad and then just like chromatic, all the notes in the scale, just everything, not even in a scale. It doesn't even matter about the theory. That's just going to suddenly like jolt you out of your comfort zone and then back into something that's just a single note or whatever. So I guess it's more about the contextualization than that. So it's good to understand these things, but at the end of the day, it's like it's more about how you use it and understanding how people relate to those things. And it's actually interesting. It's something that I actually get quite often. After like performing and stuff, people will be like, "Oh, you didn't play a track that said my name in it." And I've actually, it's happened so often. And I think it's because like, I know it's so weird. It's like, did you have a sample in there that had my name? It's like, no, sorry, like I didn't. I would have loved to, but like that's not the case. But I think it's because people get into this like zone and they're just like thinking about like their psyche, like so subconscious, and they like they're hearing like thoughts and stuff, and it doesn't matter what sounds you put in there as long as there's something to keep them going. I think it's the whole like understanding of music is so personal to everybody. I think it can kind of be anything, and people will relate to what they would have related to it anyway. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. I don't know if that's a good explanation.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. And a similar but slightly different perspective on that is I also think that like emotions that we have are both more simple and more complex, right? Like I don't know if you've ever looked up on Google or something, but like there's this huge list of emotions that like describe very specific situations. But I also think that fear, anger, happy, sad, blah, 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 all of those things in general are also incredibly general, not to be redundant. So I think that there are certain things or certain feelings that are on a more granular scale than just fear or happy or sad that music is much better at translating than spoken vocabulary, right? Because what fear means or what that is could be something that fear could be the result of all of these other little feelings or experiences that lead up to that specific thing, right? And there's also degrees of that, of like, you don't hear something and then you're like, holy shit, I'm scared for the rest of the day. You're like, whoa, that was really, like you said, really uncomfortable or really scary, or that made me feel a change or a shift. And then the identification behind that could be, I felt this and the feeling was the same, but the way that we describe it might be completely different. I don't know if that seems crazy or not, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally. I think it's why any form of expression or art or creativity or whatever it is, photography or painting or whatever people do, is important, because it allows one to tap into the fact that there's more emotions than just 12 notes in the scale. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think, a lot of the time society teaches us, like, be happy or be sad, like choose one.
Yeah.
And move on. Like, if you're sad, you're a low life. If you're happy, you're going to be a success, or whatever the case is. But it's like, things are a lot more complex than that. And I think art, even if people aren't relating it, or music, or any type of creativity, even if people aren't relating it to it on like that level physically, I think subconsciously it teaches people about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
About self-expression and that kind of thing.
And it should. Because even though we are animals on the surface of, we have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to, have functions of that matter, when we start talking about these things and we start talking about feelings, it's, I don't want to get too like into that or like political or anything, but there's so much of this discussion as being a human, since like our language has been refined, that talks about nothing but, in some case or another, feelings. What feelings we could talk about, especially, being a man and, all that stuff. And then whatever, all of like the political history that's come about that has kind of shifted. But I do find it interesting that we kind of choose to accept it in certain scenarios, but we also choose to like ignore it in certain scenarios. And I think that it's interesting to see how there's a balance between that. Yeah, that might be a conversation for a different day, but that's what happens when we talk about things. In any case, I am going to shift the subject just a little bit, unless if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I think it's one of the reasons why perhaps art or creativity or expression in general is something that has bloomed so much over the past couple of decades, is because society kind of has taught people to not express themselves, so kind of bottled up and bottled up and bottled up.
Yeah.
And now it's like people are like, oh, it's okay to do a thing. People are just kind of like, it's, which I think is a good thing.
Do you think that it conflicts with like our ability to survive though? Like it conflicts with our ability to be primal, or at what point does somebody say you got to put your feelings aside because you have something to do, or you have to complete something? Like I think that it's safe to say that you and I are really fortunate that we're even having this conversation, but also the fact that we're able to do music and stuff. But if we weren't in the positions that we were, it could very, very easily be said of like, I can't even fucking think about music because I gotta go farm all day because I need to grow crops to make sure that we survive.
Totally, man. But what's more primal than like banging the rocks together and having a good time? You know what I mean? Like, I'm telling you, man, here in South Africa, like I've seen some destitute people that still make the best, most creative things out of really tough situations.
Yeah.
And I think that's often when you can see the creativity really shine, because in the face of adversity, people have to like work so much harder to even get like a paintbrush or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so, especially I think in South Africa, like creativity and culture and art and music is such a big thing here. But it's because so many people had to face adversities,
I'm so glad you said that, because that's actually where I was going. Not necessarily in the sense of adversity and stuff, but really just about, your experience in South Africa, because it's almost crazy. Like, I know that you have a different accent than I do, but even though you are completely on the opposite side of the country, like complete opposite side of the country right now, I feel like I don't necessarily feel like you or I belong to, any specific nationality or anything. It's just two people talking. And so I'm kind of curious as to what your experience in that has been like, and have you been outside the country, or, have you ever talked to anybody from the States? I'm sure you have, but you know what I mean. But like, have you had any conversations like this with people in the States, and what's that been like?
I've been outside the country twice, like, but when I was much younger. Once I went to Zimbabwe, and once I went to Australia. And Zimbabwe was amazing. I mean, it's the situation there is a bit crazy right now, but it's so beautiful. Like it was such an incredible place. Australia was nice, but it was a bit strange because I think people didn't really understand me as a South African, and it was before the internet was really a thing. So it was just a bit weird. I felt like a bit of an outsider walking in there and stuff. But I still had a good time. It was a great holiday and stuff like that. But something that I think is like over the last decade or something that I like really appreciate, being so far disconnected from the developing world, is the internet kind of democratizing information and things like that for everybody. I mean, like anybody could put something on the internet and people could connect to that and that kind of thing. So I feel like maybe 10 years ago there was this huge disconnect between like it still kind of sometimes does feel like it, like between America and the rest of the world. Do you know what I mean? Because that's where the movies are made. Do you know what I mean?
I'm sorry.
Feel like how close are you to Hollywood?
I grew up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully, I don't have like the Hollywood vibe within me, but
no,
yeah.
not at all, not at all. It's but like I think nowadays it's something that's far less of less apparent. You know what I mean? Yes, like obviously still like privilege does exist in the world, but like in terms of how information is spread and being an independent creator, there aren't that many hurdles involved, like in terms of the developing world versus the developed world, if that makes sense. So yeah. I think for myself, like I started, and I was very lucky for it to have started at the time that it did, like getting into the internet and sharing my music online and stuff right at like the golden age.
Right. I do have just kind of like a general thing, but would you say that, I'm sure that every country has, like obviously like more expensive and less expensive places to live and stuff, but do you feel like, or I guess like, how would you rate, just the ability to survive or the difficulty to be comfortable where you're from?
Okay, so the crazy thing here is that, especially in the city that I live in, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but like it's known to be one of the most economically like I don't know what the word is, but like economically divided cities in the world.
Class divided.
Yeah, where you're either like pretty destitute or you're stinking rich, and there's like a couple of people in between, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like compared to like the developing world and stuff, it's relatively cheap to survive here, but at the same time, like it's I don't want to say that because life can be cheap in a lot of situations for a lot of people in the country. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but
it makes sense. And I know that's a difficult question to answer too, right? Because like on one end, you kind of have to relate your own experience, whether it be through how you're living or through your friends or the people that you know or the hardship that you've seen from a third party perspective. But, I think that because I've only been to Canada and Mexico, so I've never been overseas anywhere or anything, but I want to learn more about what is happening in the outside world, and I think that America does a really shit job of giving us anything that's happening anywhere else. And so that's not your responsibility to tell me by any means, but I am curious and I am like just wanting to know because America is unfortunately so, I'm very unpatriotic by the way, but America is unfortunately so like on the high horse. We're the best country in the world, blah, blah, blah. We're doing this. And I'm like, I feel like people are so much happier in other countries and in different places, and I'm like, how, you know, I don't know. I would kill to live in Australia or Japan or, you know, in a lot of different places actually. But that's my perception. That's how I think about other places. You know, it's almost like idolized in some cases. You know, and I wonder, do you like? Let me ask you this: do you have any like desire to come to America?
So yes, because I want the experience. I want to see it. Like, you know what I mean. I want to go to all the places, but also like the natural resources there seem really, really cool. Like, I like the outdoors. I mean, I don't go hiking often, but like when I do, I really like to go into like beautiful forests and stuff. And we have a lot of that here in South Africa. And I know like some states, like I've seen pictures. It's like really, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So I think I would have a lot of fun there, but I'm not sure how well I would fit in if, like, I don't think I would ever move there, if that makes sense, because I feel like politically, I mean, it just doesn't seem like the kind of place I would want to be.
Right.
But at the same time, as a South African, it's, you know, sometimes it's not the safest place to be in the world here. And I mean, I don't fear for my life or anything, but like, I know a lot of people like move overseas because they do and that kind of thing. So
yeah, I mean,
there's that, you know.
It is important to, you know, to recognize that, and in the same way as some people do from where you're from, you know, I grew up in California, and that used to be my life. I was like, well, you know, I don't want to talk about that, but you know, but I know what that's like, and you would almost rather be anywhere else in the world than have to live in that neighborhood or live in that specific environment or with those circumstances or whatever. And it's important to note that like there are good and bad things no matter where you live, and that's something that as I get older, I realize like it's kind of like what you make out of it, right? Sorry if I look over here, I'm looking at chat, so that's not me like ignoring you or anything, but.
No, totally. I'm like trying to keep up, but like I'm in the conversation, so I can't really. But yeah.
Yeah, no worries. And if you ever want to, you know, answer, you know, there's a couple questions on here. Sorry, chat, we're not ignoring you. I'm reading what you guys say and trying to like type little messages while him and I are having our conversation. So there is that. But I feel like it's so compelling that I'm like more here. But somebody somebody asked how old you were. That's one of those questions that like if you don't want to answer, you don't have to.
So I'm actually turning 34 next week. This weekend. I'm going away for the weekend. I'm like turning all my social media's phone off, and I'm like literally zoning out for the weekend.
That's awesome.
Just
man.
me and the girlfriend.
So how
got
long
like
have you been...
Airbnb in this little seaside village, like an hour's
sick.
drive away.
Oh, so young. Y'all both epic people. Thanks, Delta Rose. How long have you actually like? Would you say that you've like been doing, let's say, music production?
So I like started seriously. Like I said, I was always dabbling a little bit. Like when I was younger, and I was in some bands. I try to record the bands and that kind of stuff. But I think must have been in like the early 2000s when I actually buckled down and I was like, okay, I'm gonna actually start producing music. Like here's Fruity Loops. Let's do this. You know,
crazy. That's a long time.
I think it was like 2001 or 2002, around there.
Man, that's so great, dude. That's like almost 20 years. That's almost as long as
basically 20 years now.
Actually, you've been doing music longer than I've been training in martial arts and doing flips and shit. That's fucking crazy. I started.
One thing I remember is one thing I can tell you definitively is I've been making music since before Cubase had an undo function. I remember like you did something and it was there, like you dealt with it. And that's why music, I think, was like a little bit more primitive back then, is because people were just like, fuck it, I'm not undoing this shit.
Yeah, the technology, right? It was just like, well, guess we better commit to that and make the best of it. Hence resampling, right? No, I'm kidding. But no, that's really cool. I wonder, is there a time during your music production, we'll say like as you started becoming more proficient in music where, or sorry, in Psytrance where you were like, okay, I got it, and you started maybe having the confidence to be like, I want to send this out, I want to try to put this as a release, or I want to, do that, or like, can you give us any insight about what that process was like to you?
I think it's a difficult one because I still feel like there's so much that I could still learn to be where I want to be, and I think, but that's the kind of thing that's going to push one to be a better artist. I think at any point, if you say like, I got it, no, bro, you don't got it.
You never
Nobody's
do,
got
right?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I think that's like with anything in life. It's like the moment you say you got it, something hands you a lemon.
I think it's interesting too, though, right? Because like, especially if you're somebody that's grounded or humble in that aspect of playing that role of, well, maybe I do still have enough to improve on, but this seems good enough to see what happens. Long story short, can I do a quick intermission? That's my brother. I took him to the hospital yesterday. He's okay, but can I just check with him? Because he's calling me twice.
Please.
So yeah,
please
he's fine.
do,
I just
please
need
do.
to answer this.
I want to get a
just 1 second.
jersey and a refill of water as well. So
Okay, yes, let's take a quick break.
Elevator break.
Hello? Yo. I'm on. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, my brother went to the. He didn't. He got hurt a week ago, and then we took him to the hospital yesterday to get him checked out. So I was just kind of making sure that he was okay. He's fine, and we're just kind of working some semantics out. I'm just gonna re-chat while we wait for him to return, so no rush on him. But Let me see. Anyone here use LMMS on their first actual DAW? That was a fun one. Was that your first DAW? I haven't even tried it before. I'm trying to figure out if I can customize my Oxygen Pro with Bitwig, if anyone knows. I have the controls mapped for preset, but the drop-down control option doesn't show up like on tutorials. I wouldn't know. Do you have a script that's downloaded for Bitwig? Welcome back, Dash.
Hey.
Used to have some older projects that would not open up, crashing a lot, clicking noises in the audio. Not sure if it was a Cubase thing, but I would always get clicks after a while. That might be just your sound card. Oh yeah, the crashing. Yep, I still get those. Okay. Welcome back. My brother's fine. I just, it's just one of those things that I'm like, it's a health thing, and I'm like, are you okay? Everything cool? And he's all right. So thank you for giving me that grace. Excuse me. I don't even remember what we were talking about.
No worries, man.
But
we can maybe get to one of the million questions that I probably missed.
It's okay. I can fire off a million questions, and one thing that I will say that I think I've gotten pretty good at is just being like, I need to ask you something, and I'm going to come up with something to ask you. So you touched earlier on the idea about like music and performance, right? And about sharing that experience with stuff. I'm curious as to if you have any thoughts on doing performance on a stage in a personal level, and also if it feels any different, or if you feel like there's something unique or similar, or just any thoughts in general on the stage versus streaming on Twitch or on YouTube.
Yeah. So obviously, when I'm streaming at home, doing the performances and stuff, I'm a lot more comfortable. So like I take risks, like a lot more risks.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I'm performing, especially on a bigger system like a Function One system or something like that, where it's a tuned system, I'll often end up just DJing tracks that I've made,
mm-hmm.
and just mixing those because they're already mastered, they're already mixed to perfection. Like it's gonna sound ace on that rig, and I guess it also depends on the size of the event, whether I will bring extra synths to kind of play on top and that kind of stuff. But when I'm performing at an event, I've never actually taken my modular synth to an event and done a full like live jam like that, because I feel like, what if just one thing peaks too high on that frequency and then the rig just cuts out, and it's you have the responsibility of like 2,000, 3,000 people's ears, but also of making sure that they're having a good time. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think there's this balance between being a performer, but also just performing well. And at that part of the balance, then I start looking at rather just DJing my tracks as opposed to performing it live. Then obviously when I'm at home, I'm a lot more comfortable. So I have like everything plugged in. I'm doing stuff that I've never actually tried before. Then that stuff often ends up just being recorded and used in a track, mm-hmm. that I then just mix perfectly, master, and then
it's interesting though that you say that, and it's a really cool perspective, because I actually I've never done anything music related on stage. It's all been circus acrobatics and blah 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 and backflips and stuff. But what I find interesting is that I actually had to build a larger comfortability with being comfortable with my own music on YouTube as a streamer or content creator compared to doing shows and stuff. And I think the reason why was because I always felt like I was doing the wrong thing when I was making music or doing sound design or something. And that's part of the reason why I actually think that I learned so much, was because people like you come into the channel, which thank you, by the way. I love that you come into the channel and you're like, hey, dude, you're doing this, or I get a chance to talk to, Cage or something, and they teach me something about mid-side EQing. And, that's all like semantics and shit. But at the same time, I do think that, like you said, of the matter of information sharing, that's the wonderful thing about the internet. And I'm kind of curious as to, how has it impacted you personally, since you've been an electronic music production artist before the age of the internet and YouTube, all to being a content creator for that, and being you've got a huge subscriber base. A lot of people watch you and listen to you, and they should. So how does that impact you, I guess? And then I've got another question for you, but I'll wait for that.
So like on a personal level, I guess back in the early days, before we had much more internet access and stuff like that, getting into the scene or any scene, I guess, is very much about like who you know, what friends you have in the scene, and that kind of thing. I've always been a very introverted person. I'm pretty socially awkward, and it probably doesn't seem like it to people who watch me on a camera. But I mean, like, I can talk to a machine all day long. Like, trust me. But I'm
Yeah.
very socially awkward. So for me,
Work.
networking was always very difficult. Like in actual person. Still with social media and that kind of stuff, I struggle with it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But I I never really had opportunities because of the fact that it was very hard for me to network and to do the whole social aspect of being a professional musician. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then as the internet started becoming more of a viable aspect to promoting oneself, um, personally, I just felt it so much easier because it, I guess you could say that most industries suffer from severe gatekeeping. And, for example, if a person doesn't like you or they don't think that you're a particular way or they have expectations and you don't meet that, then they're not going to promote you to their friend who's an organizer or promoter or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But the internet basically just like democratizes all of that. It's like, here's the information. Does it have the numbers? Yes, that means people relate to it. That means the music is fucking good. Then book the dude. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Absolutely. And I guess like that does kind of put promoters and stuff in a unique and awkward situation, right? Because like obviously they have their own tastes and stuff on things, and I wonder how they kind of figure that out, right? Because I don't know, like on one end you've got people that are making incredible music and nobody listens to them. And then on the other end, you've got these other guys that are like paying for top 40 on Beatport, trying to say, hey, I've got the views, I've got this. Um, I guess, like, of course, you have to listen to the music and stuff, but I also think that people are very forward thinking and coming up with an insane amount of new, interesting, or different stuff at an incredibly rapid rate. Like, hyperpop I did not understand until very recently. And it's not that I hated it and that I didn't like it. I just didn't know about it. I didn't understand it until I had talked with several people about it. But, you get this label that is primarily trap based, and then you get, somebody sending hyperpop to their label and they're like, what do I do with this? So I wonder how that process even works out, or how people even figure that shit out.
Well, I think like now, even the fact is, let's break down like the idea of a label. I think the internet, in its current form, has proven the fact that kind of labels are kind of pointless. In my opinion, a label is just a gate that people use to gatekeep,
Right.
and I think artists should just be putting their stuff out there, and
Yeah.
maybe I guess a label can help to categorize or pigeonhole specific music. But nowadays, people are so specific about doing that with the subgenre anyway,
Right.
that subgenres are turning over so quickly that like next week we're going to have a new label which is now specific to some new subgenre, and then the last label that was hot last week is now no longer relevant. We could skip the whole idea of labels and just people just put out a new thing. You know what I mean? Artists put out a hyperpop album now. It doesn't matter what label it's on. And the
Sure.
cool thing about that is now he's not, because often I'm not sure how much you've dealt with labels and stuff in the past, but like the biggest thing that for me, the issue that I have with contracts with labels is every time I've ever had to release with a label, they stipulate in the contract that you're not allowed to put out music for X amount of months after you have released with them. So it might be 6 or 12 months. And that means you as an artist have to just stop being creative for 6 months. Like, what?
Well,
And
you
like,
can't release music, right?
yeah, but for me, as like a YouTuber, it means I can't post a track on YouTube. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
that's actually post. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like things turn over much quicker than the old industry, and the labels haven't adapted. And the artists are adapting so quickly that it's kind of like we've moved out of the realm of the necessity of needing it, I think.
No, I agree. And most people that I've talked to also agree about that. But it does make me wonder. On one end, there's two questions that come to mind. What would you say would be not the best, right? Or not even the right way, because that doesn't exist. But what advice might you have for people that are trying to make it as a music producer? I know, right? As a music producer, just off their music. And is there still any merit towards being part of a label? And the reason why I ask that is because I have submitted to labels in the past. I have never put anything out on a label other than Soul Steel Records. That's me, and I'm the only person on that label.
Soul Steel.
Yeah, you know,
Uh,
I know,
so,
but
so, yeah, I guess it depends. So, like, a lot of the time, I think the label is more about asserting oneself at a particular quality of music, and people think, okay, now that I'm on X or YZ or XYZ label, now I've made it as an artist. Does that make sense? It's like the goal that everyone is going for. And I think the labels know this, and they kind of take advantage of that. You know what I mean? So they're like,
yeah,
okay, now you've made it. Now don't worry about releasing for the next year. And that person's not going to bother like about fine tuning their craft and stuff for the next year, and it's going to die out. And I think a lot of the time these labels aren't in it to actually. They're not in it for the culture. You know what I mean? They're in it for profits and to control the future, like of what labels are going to be competing with them in the future, and
right.
that kind of thing. And that could lead me down this whole other rabbit hole of this thing I've been fighting for a little while now. But sorry, what was the other question that you asked before that?
What, if any, advice would you give to people that are trying to make it as a producer, or not somebody that does everything, right? Because that's, I think you and I have already talked about that on our channel several times about like, you know, there's other shit that you can do, but just as maybe somebody who's like, I just want to make a living off like my music, your music or their music or whatever.
I would say two things, like add value in whatever way that is, and just be super consistent. So in terms of value, if it's high quality WAV files for free, or whether it's maybe like a free something preset pack with the download or whatever it is, like some kind of value to the person that's gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna take my 5 minutes out of my precious time to click on that link. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Value is the most important thing. And two, consistency, because especially as an independent artist, you're up against these big labels who have budget, who are paying Facebook and Instagram and whatever to like constantly be in the forefront.
Yeah.
And to go up against that, you really have to be consistent. And whether it's saying, okay, every single day I'm going to wake up and post a stupid thing on Instagram, I'm going to post a stupid thing on TikTok, and then I'm going to work on my music for an hour, and then once a month I'm going to post that music, and you just stick to that for a year. People are going to keep coming back every Friday or whatever it is. They're going to keep coming back because they know every Friday they're going to get some good quality shit. Does that make sense?
They know that you're going to be there.
Exactly. And I think a lot of being like a music personality or whatever is like people rely on you to have a good time. You know what I mean? Right. And now with music being so expendable, people want a unique good time every time. And like I'm like that as well. You know, like when I find an artist, I want to go there every day and I want to find a new song. And if I don't, I'm going to move on to a new artist. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It happens with me, and I know it happens with so many other people as well, you know?
I'm cursed. This cursed blood of mine. Because I have a very difficult time listening to music for the sake of enjoying music these days. And that's also a blessing. So when I go back to your when I go back to your music, right, there are going to be very specific goal-oriented things that I'm going to be dissecting out of what you've done, especially from the conversation that we've had. But everything that I do is so critical, and on one end, it sucks because I can't just be like, oh man, this is, I can, but I have to consciously like listen to the shit and enjoy it, as opposed to like really trying to not dissect every production choice that somebody made at every specific moment, or taking the most prominent thing. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to, the people that I aspire to make music like, and just been like, how the fuck do they do that? And it's great, because it takes a lot of that in order to kind of reach the awareness aspect to incorporate within your own music. But there is a trade-off of just being able to be like, yo, the music is like, I just want to listen to some cool shit. I don't know. I think that like it's really cool that everybody has the ability now as well, like kind of adding to that, to put out their music, and to, there's so many producers, and I think that there's a space for everybody. But at the same time, it's created this novelty, just like you said, with just being like, stop for a second, listen to this shit, and listen to it several times, and try to get as much as you can from it, as opposed to just being like, that was dope, next song, that was dope, next song, and not even like saving it in a playlist or something, right? Ironically, and I posted this on my own Discord, but I've been searching for some songs that I used to have from like 15 years ago, just out of pure nostalgia. And those matter to me. And the reason why they matter to me isn't because they're great songs, or it isn't because they're my favorite, but it's because they impacted me during specific moments in time of like my life. And I'm just kind of curious as to like if you have any thoughts on the novelty aspect of it.
Well, I think, yes, I can speak on that a little bit in what helped me to overcome that a little bit. I do actually just want to respond to
sure.
Resonate's thing in the chat about pigeonholing labels. Yeah, absolutely, like you're right. I shouldn't have generalized like that. But I think a lot of time, like, I think the labels that you're talking about, Resonate S, is more collectives. You know what I mean? They're not actually operating as businesses. The moment labels are operating as businesses, to not have profit as your number one goal is to be is to be at odds with the idea of having a business. So they're not in it for the culture. Do you know what I mean? I think the idea of what you think of like smaller businesses is more collectives, and they're using it as a label, as in terms of like, this is the type of style I have. And in that sense, we might as well just be pigeonholing it with the different types of subgenres that we do. Do you know what I mean? Because, I mean, if we think about it, like in Psytrance, it happens where people will be like, okay, now this is middle tempo, liquid, full-on Psytrance. And it's only one label that will use that long subgenre. And then another label will come and be like, this is progressive, organic, something or other, and then a different label will have a different one, but they might as well just be using the subgenre. Do you know what I mean? And just know that this is a collective of artists that work together and promote each other. There shouldn't have to be this image of, yes, we promote each other. They should just do it. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's not enough people just doing it in the scene. There's too many people with the image of like, we're a collective, we're doing this together as a culture. But it's like, well, why is the scene in the state that it is,
Sorry, Dash, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
no, totally, please do.
Not just that, but sometimes labels can actually be hella dangerous in the sense that, like, being part of the label is almost synonymous of, like, being part of a music mob or being part of a music gang. Like, just look at all the history of 80s and 90s and early 2000s hip-hop and about how all that shit went down. Suge Knight.
Totally.
Right? So like that stuff exists too, and even if
it actually can actually affect your life.
Right. Or look at like the controlling matters of like what Britney Spears went through. There's a huge documentary on like all of her life and how her dad and all that shit happened that was so like controlling to her that she had like little control over her life. I was talking to Zane the other day, I think, and there was somebody, maybe it was my girlfriend. I was talking to somebody, and was it you maybe about the Backstreet Boys?
Yes.
Yeah, they made.
Did you
Do
watch
you
that
want?
documentary?
No, I haven't yet. But do you want to like quickly summarize that since you're the one who told me?
Yeah, yeah. So there's this documentary about how they were conned by a big label out of like millions of dollars, and like we still know the Backstreet Boys as like some of the most, successful pop artists of all times, But
Yeah.
like in this documentary, like the people from Backstreet Boys, except for who was like the main one, except for him, he made a solo career where he still went on to make a lot. But all of the other ones said like the most they'd ever seen out of their full career was like $10,000, and like that's mind blowing, to think about, like, you know,
Yeah.
where did all that money go? Like, I'm sure they made more than that in just a day in CD sales.
Exactly. Well, unless if all the money that they made in CD sales went to, you know, not them, and that's that's a whole different story, and that's why I low key like have been scared of like being in a band or being in something, right? The lead singer stands up and is like, "I'm the band, you're this," and I'm not going to pay you as much money, and some shit like that, and it's just like I've got
I see
one.
Databroth said something about Jimi Hendrix was kidnapped by the mob and held for ransom over a record contract. That's insane. How are you doing, Databroth, by the way? But like, I didn't even know that. I love Jimi Hendrix, and I didn't even know that.
I didn't know that either. I didn't see. Oh, that's because I'm in top chat. I'm so sorry. I should be in live chat. Hi, Databroth. Also, guys, if you do or don't, go follow Databroth. If you guys aren't subscribed to Dash, Dash is a much bigger channel than mine, but everybody that comes in, go follow Dash Glitch. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to me. I'm kidding. But yeah.
But yeah, also like going back to the thing you were saying about often over analyzing music and that kind of thing, and it being a bit of a curse. And I actually had that for a very long time, and something that helped me to kind of like break out of that is to create like a self-generative patch on like my modular synth or VCV rack or something, where there's no clock or anything. It's kind of just making music by itself, and then just sit back and like just listen to it. And like, you're forcing yourself, you can't have an opinion about it, because the moment it's now gone,
it's gone. Yeah,
it doesn't matter anymore. Exactly. And you just get into this. It's almost therapeutic, I guess, for somebody who critically overanalyzes stuff all day long. It's therapeutic to force yourself out of that, to just be like, this is the music that you're supplied for this one moment in time, and then it's gone. Just enjoy it for what it is. And it helps you to get into, it's almost like muscle memory, I guess, where you're stretching that muscle in your brain that is allowed to enjoy things.
You're going to hate me for saying this. I totally agree with you. And in that other sense, you could also use Generative in a means of listening to it in the same way, and then beginning to identify parts of it that you could hear being more music, which totally goes against the advice. But at the same time, which could be a cool thing to kind of touch on, like.
But that's the cool thing about doing it rather in the hardware, because it's done. Like, unless you're recording it, you're not going to get it again. Sorry, like it's not happening.
Yeah.
So there's this freedom in the sense where like I patch up the modular synth, plug it in, and I just sit on the couch or just sit back and like, or go do some house stuff and just let it play loud. And
does your system play throughout your whole like living environment?
Not really, but like my house is pretty small, so like it's just out this door here is like my lounge area and kitchen, semi-detached vibe.
Yeah. And I agree with that too. And I think I wonder if like would you agree maybe that or disagree or whatever, but why somebody like Azure State has like kind of done so well. I think that would be the best way to say that, is like he's got some videos that are like 4 hours of generative music and stuff that are like 4 hours long. I don't think it's just because he's got a nice studio.
It's actually a very good analogy, because if I don't have the time to patch something, I'll put on as Azure State video and then go do whatever or zone out and stuff, because he does exactly that. Like, he will make a generative patch, or there's a couple of other people as well. Although Martin Sturzer does it's generative stuff, but he also does a lot of dub techno stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's a lot. It's actually the perfect analogy because I do put it on that kind of thing to just like, and even
Yeah.
that 4 hours of grid doing the generative thing. At first, I made that patch so that I could just zone in that therapeutic moment thing. And
Yeah.
then I thought, you know what, let me just record this, because I love watching that kind of thing on YouTube. Maybe other people will want to watch this.
I haven't personally done that like for that specific purpose, but a lot of times when I'm done producing, like, and I'm sure you've been around in chat or something, I'm like, I'm just going to make something generative so that way there's something in the background while we talk, and I love doing that, especially within the grid and stuff. Which leads me to my next question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how disappointed in me were you when I tried the signal state?
Not at all, because like, it's
I'm kidding,
the
but
thing. The thing is with puzzle games is some people enjoy that level of frustration. Do you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
some people, it's just like it's not a thing. You know what I mean?
So like,
And
did
so
you
like,
have the same experience with the frustration aspect of it?
yeah, but I loved every second of it.
Oh my gosh. Big ups to you, man. I love adversity and I love challenge, but maybe specific kinds of challenge. Like I would rather get my ass kicked over and over again, and I can say that because I've gotten my ass kicked over and over again to beat the game, I guess, like getting, like a black belt or some shit, than sitting there trying to make sense of something that I felt personally like maybe the information was there, but I felt like I did not have enough information for it, and I was just like, what am I doing? Help. And then it made it like funny, but worse that like, I've got all these suggestions in chat and I'm trying to like decode and demystify like what everyone is saying because it's all like notated hella weird, and I'm just like, fucking help me, dude. LOL, this
So
guy
yeah, I
plays
think
Dark Souls.
it's like a specific genre of game. I think most popularized by a company called Zachtronics,
Hmm.
and I don't know if you know about Shenzhen IO, but the game ships with a manual like
Hmm.
this with data
Oh my
on
god.
different like chipsets and that kind of thing. And the idea in the game is you have to program chips so that they do certain functions. So like the puzzles don't tell you anything. You got to read through this manual and I mean the thing for me is like I guess it's weird because like I do that stuff in the day, like reading through manuals of VSTs trying to figure out how do I quantize this signal or how do I invert this signal and stuff like that. And then it's like at night to have fun, I do the same, but call it a
Hmm.
game.
Yeah, man. Fuck, dude. It just, and I don't know. Like there are certain things that I do like that are difficult. That are supposed to be more of a mental challenge, I guess. But I don't know that in particular. I was just like, I don't. I'm not saying that. I think the game is really cool, and I think that a lot of like there's a lot of value behind that. Not only with learning the logic side of things, like we've talked about before. Obviously, like you are a case study of that. Like the products and stuff that you've been able to kind of come up with have been incredibly beneficial, at least as far as what you told me. But on the same time, I just wish that there was a little bit more of like explanation behind like, here is the formula, right? Now go apply it. And maybe that's just because that's how
Yeah.
I learned math, but a lot of times it's like, do this and do this, but it's a code, but it doesn't mean this. It actually means this. But I'm like, but there's a double meaning, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that shit hurts my head. It's still really
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. It does rely a little bit on somebody understanding a little bit about certain things, like, for example, the Boolean logic gates. Um, but I think the reason why they don't have like a big manual like that is because those kinds of logic gates are very common in electronic programming and in modular synthesis
Hmm.
and that kind of stuff. So if, for example, like an AND gate, if you just search on like Google, what is an AND gate? It'll have like the exact thing. Do you know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
can hack it through the game with just like another browser open on Google, but at the same time, some people just don't enjoy that type of entertainment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
And
I
I totally
wanted.
get it. And at the end of the day, I enjoyed it because I think it's valuable.
So did.
From what we do as content creators is we don't always only have to show you certain products which align with what we want. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
I think it's important to be impartial and to do things which might, for example, like you show something and give it a try, even though it's like at first you didn't enjoy it, or maybe then you have an opinion about it, but the viewers might have a totally different opinion, and maybe you did something that opened their eyes in a particular way. Does that make sense? So one example might be like you didn't enjoy the game, but maybe some viewer who's in your chat who's just gotten into Grid was like, this is what an AND gate is. Yep. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then they go research about it, and now they're super inspired, and now they're making their own Grid instruments and stuff like that, you know? So again, I think it's super important that you just started that conversation, you know?
Absolutely. And I think that you and I have both done reviews with that in mind, right? Aside from the things that were like, this is sick and this is why I think it's sick, you know, I've definitely reviewed a couple of things that I'm like, hey, it's not my favorite, but, you know, you be the judge of that. I think in some way or another, the Ableton versus Bitwig videos that I've done, I think I can talk a little bit more from experience because I've spent years on both, and so I'm like, I can have an opinion on that, or at least I feel entitled to. But you know, something with that, it's important to talk about the pros and cons of those things and about, you know, what somebody is looking for, because like you say, not every product is meant for or you, and it's, I do try to see the good in every product that I try. And most of the stuff that I've reviewed, I'm like, I want to review it because I think that it's got something interesting or compelling about it. But at the same time, you know, I do hope that I don't know if you watched the conversation that I had with Weaver Beats and stuff, but he's kind of like really taking that internally and really going in and being like, this plugin is this plugin is that, here's the good and bad. And I love that he's kind of like taken that, because I think he does it really well. But it's hard because people usually want an opinion on it. They want, should I buy it? Should I not buy it? You know, how many people look at a review and they just skip to the end and they're like, is it worth it? And a lot of times, if you ever post a video of a review, is it worth it? It's, a lot of people are going to click on it because they want to know, like, yo, what up, Zane?
Is it worth it?
Yeah.
I think also like, hey, what kind, my Owens?
have you guys talked yet?
A little bit, like in your chat and stuff.
In my chat?
Not
okay,
on a personal
so
level, I don't think. Yeah.
I
think we may have met like once or twice as well at an event or something.
Oh, in person? Okay. Zane, physicist.
I do know Zane's music.
Dash, yeah, he's come on the channel before as well, and we've had conversations. But he's in lines with Cage and stuff, and that's definitely, this is the irony, right? That we were talking about at the beginning of the video, or at the beginning of the conversation. But I would love for you guys to talk and stuff and to network, because you guys are both lovely people from the same geography. So please say hi to each other. You already did. You get what I'm saying though. But yeah, fucking plugins and shit. It's hard because people just want a verdict, I think, is what's really hard to describe. And even rating systems.
I think that's something that I really appreciate about your content and coming into your streams and chatting with you is 9 times out of 10, or maybe even 10 times out of 10, is you won't just be like, I'll get this because it's sick. You'll always offer like a really thoughtful reason or that kind of thing. Which always makes me question things and makes me think about things. Whereas most of the time with YouTubers, they'll just be like, oh, just get this because I tell you it sounds better than this one. Does that make sense?
Right.
I feel like maybe I try to do that with my content, you know, like even though like the people tune me, my thumbnails are clickbaity or whatever, at the end of my plugin videos, I always say like, is it worth it? I don't know. You tell me in the comments. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's like my thing. Like you tell me in the comments.
And I think you should, because it's not, I think that even though I see where you're coming from that, right? Because on one end, it's something to encourage engagement, but you also have to realize that by encouraging the engagement, and not you, but like our viewers and stuff, or anybody that watches this, is that the engagement is healthy because it doesn't put us on a pedestal and it puts us in a position to have a conversation. And that's what we want. Like, I don't know about you, but I constantly check my phone for comments. I'm like, who commented? Who's got something to say? And it's not because I'm ready to shut somebody down. It's because I love talking to people like you. That's why you're here. well, thank you for being here. But you get what I'm saying? Like, I love talking to producers that have these opinions and that have these diverse things because I'm here to learn. Like, in my eyes, you know, you are somebody that's been doing this longer than I have. You seem to be really enjoying what you're doing as far as music, which is the most important thing, but you've also seemed to have found some kind of succession in that. And I'm like, that's the kind of people that I want to be around, that I want to talk to, because I don't want to be even somebody that's successful if they're like, yeah, I made it, but I fucking hate music. Like, why am I here then? Why is anybody here? And so with that, I want the engagement. I want us to be able to have these conversations, and I want to be able to provide a safe space that everybody can come to be like, hey, you bought something recently, maybe not recent, but you were talking to me about the black box. And I was like, oh, well, what do you like about it? Because I might have bought it if I agreed, if it lined up with my production needs. But if I didn't have you as a valuable resource, I never even would have known the thing existed.
Oh man, I love the fucking thing. Well, I've got
Yeah.
the Bitbox, which is like the Eurorack version, but fuck, the thing is so cool, so fucking cool. It's basically like it can do like everything except for like one or two synth voices. It can do like a full track just in that little thing. It's so good. It's like I think the reason they called it the Bitbox is because it's the Bitwig in a box. It's got a little granular sampler and everything. It's so good.
I think the only thing that deterred me from it was that I wanted a groove box that could do sloppy, wonky rhythms. And I looked at the manual on it, and I couldn't see anything that had nudge on it. And I
It's
also
not
looked
very
at
good with sequencing. That's the thing. So like it's
That's
more
why I
just
didn't
like a
buy it.
live sampler retrigger. But they do another thing which I think is like the sequencer. I think it's called the toolbox or something. And so I think the idea is like buy the toolbox and the black box, and now you have the perfect combo,
ecosystem.
you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
And, you know, and that's kind of it, though. And, like, I guess hardware is the easiest to have these conversations about. Well, I guess with people that aren't, like, super zealous. And I guess people are like that with DAWs, too. FL, Bitwig, you know. Who fucking cares? But at the same time, it is cool to have these conversations about the comparisons in between. To put things into perspective, I've been doing this martial art called Jeet Kune Do for over 10 years. It's Bruce Lee's martial art. Anytime somebody quotes Bruce Lee to me, I cringe. And I have to like let that go, because I have to realize that like they haven't, you know, done that stuff. But I tell you, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because anytime we talk about a specific skill, right? We even talk about the physics of a punch or something. You just have all of these comments of like, you suck, you don't know what you're talking about, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this, it won't work in a real fight, there's this, there's this, there's this, and it's just like bam, 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 and it's just like, I don't even want to fucking talk to you guys anymore. You know what I mean? I'm like, and in that aspect, it's hella toxic. And so to have, anytime someone quotes Bruce Lee to me, I cringe. Bruce Lee. Fuck off, dude. But yeah, the negative crowd aspect of it, and that makes me not want to engage with them. It makes me, if anything, want to separate and try to like restart almost and try to do my own thing. So the fact that we have this ability to, you know, talk about these things without being a dick to each other is incredibly valuable, and I think is really healthy for the community, because I don't assume a position of leadership by any means, but I know that I've got some people that come into my stream every day, and the same thing can be said for you. And I think that it's cool that people come to this place for positivity, and as long as we're promoting that, I think that people will always want to come back, regardless of if we disagree or, you know, whatever.
Physicist, I'm in Cape Town here. Just wanted to reply to what he said.
Yeah, no worries.
And that's also another thing that like I really appreciate about Data Broth's content is it's like he just does the thing with the plugin, and it's like you can make up your own mind about what you want about the plugin. You know, I think is maybe it's because so much content on YouTube is like, this is the best thing, you know,
Right.
This is the best mic, this is the best thing, you need this, you're gonna be, this is a game
An
changer.
advertisement. Yeah, a game changer.
Exactly.
Oh god, man.
Yeah,
I'm guilty
this
of that
new
too.
plugin is the game changer, and then it's actually just the company like paying a dude, you know.
Yeah, it's hard, man. And I
I mean,
hope
like,
that-
look, at the end of the day, we all got to do it. Like, sometimes we all got to pay the bills, but like, if you're honest with people about it, then there's no problem, in my opinion. You know, like, I always put that flag on that says like paid promotion or whatever the case is. But like, there's cases where I know that like that's not so genuine. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But like I really appreciate the ones who are very genuine about it. You know.
Yeah, I think I've only done maybe like 2 or 3 reviews where somebody reached out to me, but I can tell you from the Cube, which I need to do more content on because it's actually something that I like a lot. But the Cube, Bitwig, and Faceplant, I reached out to them and I was like, hey, can I review your thing? Even if you send me an NFR, even if you send me that, because I was so interested in it and I wanted people to know about it, and I think that's what helped create a
Damn
good
straight.
relationship.
A lot of the time it's me reaching out, like with this for Scion video. Like I
Yeah.
reached out to them. I was like, listen, I bought version 1. I've used it like literally all the time in my videos. How about you guys upgrade me and I'll do a video, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that way, like, everybody wins, right? And it's not like, hey, pay me millions of dollars to put an advertisement out. It's like, Unison MiniCorp. I'm not even gonna. We're not.
Just 2 clicks, bro.
Just 2 clicks and it's perfect. But at the same time, the other people that have reached out to me, I'm like, hey, is it okay if I'm impartial? Because I might have, and the way that I phrase it is, I might have some suggestions that might help improve your product, and they're usually open to that. I can't really think of anybody that was like, no, we just want you to say good things. Unison,
Yeah,
in
fact, I usually test the waters a bit. That's actually a funny fact. Like a good thing that you brought up is 9 times out of 10 when they contact me, I'll use the plugin first, and I will almost always find a bug, and then I will let them know. And depending on how they react, that's kind of how I will tread the waters coming up from there. Like for example, with that, I did a recent plugin on this thing called Smart Comp. And I told them straight, the auto gain is broken. Like I picked it up within seconds. And they were like, oh yes, you're actually 100% correct. Quite a few people have brought it up. We're actually working on it. It'll be fixed in the next update. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to do the video anyway and mention it. And so that was really cool. So it always depends on how, sometimes they'll just come back and be like, they won't even respond because they know they're just going for those YouTubers. They're just going to show the flashy image. This plugin is a game changer. And make them a couple of thousand,
Yeah. And, it's also one of those things too, like, if I understand, like we talked about, that everybody wants to make money, but one of the best ways to keep making money is by having a good plugin, or at least even if it's broken, right? Or even if you're just like, you just made a brand new plugin or whatever, and it's all, jacked up or whatever. If you even say, hey, we're working on this, and you show that like the team is actively trying to improve, that's something to support, right? Because that's the same thing as you or I being a musician and putting out shitty music, but knowing that we're trying to like get better. It's no different to me. That's why I love Kilohearts so much, is because they are the most active people within their company that listens to every single suggestion people give them. You can go look on their Discord and they're like almost responding, not to everybody, of course, but like have so many more live responses. I just dropped a paperclip to people about suggestions or questions or whatever than any other company I've ever interacted with. And because
I was going to make that analogy as well. Yeah, you're totally right with that.
And for me, that makes it so much easier to support them because they are there for musicians. They are there for producers or sound designers or whatever. And they're like, we just want you to make the coolest shit ever. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, even if I had to, they're cool, man. I always would support them just because they've done such a good job at being like honest and have put so much work into what they've done aside to just putting out one good product and then leaving it alone.
Scarig's comment there about like they show you how easy it is to use, only for you to realize that the chords they put down in seconds comes from years of experience.
What is that guy's name that like reviews or like does all that stuff? Because he's like the plugin maker, right?
Well, I think it's Christian Henson, and he works. I'm not sure if he is Spitfire, but he works with Spitfire. Yeah, super talented musician. Yeah. It's like, listen to how this sounds.
Right. And like
ripping arrangement.
I love that he is so adventurous with his videos and stuff, and that's something that I wish I could do personally, but like I never leave my house. So he's a co-owner. Yeah, well fuck, there you go, right? But like I never leave my house.
Is that the dude from that like Catch a Predator?
Is it? That's not the kind of Chris I want to be talking about on this channel. He's also a transphobic bloke. They are very positive vibes of videos, I'm just saying. Yeah. Well, there is that. And that's a whole different deal. And that's stuff that I don't even want to talk about. But in that manner, from an entertainment perspective, right? Well, then I don't actually own anything from Spitfire, but that's really sad to hear. It's also really difficult to comment on, right? Because I'm reading that, like, that's news to me from chat. So let's move on from that, and we can have a conversation about it later. And I'm definitely up for hearing it out, of course, because that's not something I want to perpetuate of like defending somebody like that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll take him out. We'll take him out to the ringers if we have due diligence.
Shake him up. That does lead me to my next question, though. Have you encountered any like challenges of like, because people like listen to you, and like I will say that in some cases or another you are leading your project, right? You are leading something. Do you ever find it like hard? Oh, it just happened yesterday. Do you ever find it difficult to take a stance on something, or to represent something, or do you ever worry about like being misrepresented or being taken out of context?
Okay, so I just want to run to the bathroom real quick.
Okay. You do not have
think
to
about if I want to talk about something.
You do not have to answer that question.
Think about it over it.
Okay.
No, it's cool. I want to, but I got to run to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, sure thing. And if you want, I can go first.
Hey?
Talk
about your experiences.
I can go to the bathroom first. No. We can talk about my experience first if you want, if that will help make things a little bit easier.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I'll be right back in 2 minutes.
Write down my name.
He disappears forever.
I know, right? He's just
FBI comes to pick him up.
Dash has left the chat. Yeah, I'll wait for him to come back, so I'll catch up with chat. But yeah, Data Broth, I mean, since you're here, you don't ever talk on stream, so I guess there's that. But I guess something maybe to consider is when you want to come on the stream, and when you want to have a conversation, maybe it'll just be through a text chat, and I'll have my camera up, and then I can just have you chatting over here, because he's notorious for not like talking on stream or whatever. But I'll just like speak to you, and then you can just write your responses out. We can chat about that sometime. I'm kidding. I'm just giving you a hard time. But something that we were talking about earlier is the impartiality behind plugins and stuff. And Dash was admiring that because you don't really talk and you just show the plugin, it makes it really easy for people to figure out like, oh, what the synthesizer is about or whatever. And for me personally, if I don't know something about a plugin, I send people to you. No, I'm down. I just don't want to confirm or commit to anything over chat. No, man, we got to stamp it so that way everybody can see and you are accountable. Speaking of tomorrow, I've got Jeff Fufu coming in. He is from Florida, but he was somebody that I met at the Circus of Life festival. So the whole Chris story that came out to support J.K. Rowling and someone else, he stepped down, took a break, and Spitfire had come out and apologized. That's the story. Geez, I read the article about Chris' situation. Goes down a very familiar rabbit hole. Yo, Zane, physicist. Wait, Zane is your artist name, so I can say that too. I'm trying to like make sure that I'm addressing the proper, the proper names and stuff. I have a question. Can I tell everybody about what is going on tomorrow with what you guys have going on with Saturate? Or is that... Just call me Zane. Yes. Okay, so... filling the space tomorrow, Zane and Saturate Records are holding, is it going to be on Twitch? I think on twitch.tv/saturate, I want to say, they're holding a beat battle, and it's going to be tomorrow morning for the US. It's going to be at 4 p.m. I think 1600 hours at South Africa, South African time. So I will be joining. I might have to leave early because I have an appointment tomorrow for a massage, so that way I don't die. But if you want, Zane, I will link all the credentials in the announcements on my Discord, and so I will be there. I will be streaming, and I will be doing the beat battle thing along with Zane. I don't know if he's actually entering or not, but there's that. Welcome back, Dash. I was just telling everybody tomorrow, Saturate Records and Zane is hosting a beat battle on Twitch, and I was just kind of like telling everybody about that. So, yeah, it's just a networking thing. I feel of just like, hell, these guys are doing this, and it'll be cool. I think it's 4 p.m. your time because you guys are you? What is the time zone? South African something time zone?
It's GMT +2.
GMT +2. Fuck, I don't know. I had to. Okay, yeah, 1600 EST. Which is like 10 o'clock. Oh, it's gonna be at 4 p.m. tomorrow. 22 your time. Is it South African time or is it? This is why I can't fucking figure this shit out. We can figure it out later. But I must admit a respect for how deadly social media can be. He peeped out one tweet and got hit by a meteor. Yeah, being canceled and stuff. That's definitely that's South African time. Okay. Yep, Dash is a bit later in Brussels time zone. Fuck, man, my head hurts. You guys can work that out later if you're interested in checking it out. So, anyways, being accountable, right, for taking a stance or holding specific things and whatnot. For me personally, anytime something political comes up, anytime something kind of touchy comes up, I try to reiterate my stance on neutrality of like, everyone is safe here. I don't, if you are X, Y, Z, however you choose to identify, you are welcome. At the same time, that doesn't mean that I don't say stupid things. And that doesn't mean that I haven't said stupid things in the past or done stupid things. It means that that's the environment that I hope to achieve and that I hope to try to like not even start a fire before it ever even happens. That's why I try to like, I think that like the hyper pop culture, I didn't realize, but a lot of my viewers actually represent the LGBTQ community, which I think is great. And I hope that they feel like awesome being around. At the same time, I wanted to like, I was very careful about how I wanted to approach that because I didn't want to step on any toes, and it was something that I didn't want to just be ignorant about, right? Because I was like, I don't know what it is and I don't understand that, and that could be considered to be like almost like not recognizing them, right? Almost like downplaying or like being ignorant of that, which in some cases it is. But aside from that, I think that as long as that's maintained, I don't really worry about it too much. I don't worry about the whole cancellation thing or whatever, because the opinions that I give, I try to keep about music or about philosophy and life, not about political or about like systemic inequality or racism or, you know what I mean, anything else of the sort, or religion or any of that. Because it's just like, take that shit over there and sort out your problems and be there. But this is about music.
It's such a tough thing because you're absolutely right. And I think I often struggle to hold back my thoughts on particular political things, but I've kind of made the decision that, like, like you said, often it's best to offer a platform as a kind of a neutral space for conversation to be had from both sides, because often trying to push something too hard from one side might lead you down like a steep rabbit hole, for example. I think it's I think certain things are like, for me, like I will like probably flip out at a person for, and it's like racism and that kind of thing. But I think it's just because, being a South African, it's still very much like racism is still very much an open wound for a lot of South Africans. Obviously, like not me, because I didn't suffer from an oppressive system, but like I understand it because I grew up around it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So like I understand how hurtful it can be and stuff. So for me, like racism is an absolute no, and like that's the one thing I'll probably take my like put my foot down on, and probably transphobia as well. But in terms of political stuff, there's certain things which I've kind of made, let's just say, a concise decision to avoid because of um, because of the industry and that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's what I kind of find is like, I think that it's important to, and this is why I like doing this stuff, is to remind people that like you and I are both human. We're people, and I don't know about you, but my platform, I completely made myself. Aside from the mentorship that I've had with, you know, the people that have taught me things, like everything that I am doing on the internet, whatever, has all been 100% me, and I make a lot of mistakes along the way. And so I think that to say that you or I are never going to cross a line or cross a boundary, right? And that has various degrees of, you know, there's a gradient behind that, is kind of silly. But I think that coming at it from trying to be accountable and listening and trying to learn from that, I think is what it will end up building strength into our communities, as opposed to something like what just happened that we were, you know what I mean, that we're not really even discussing. And it sucks because, you know, it means that a lot could be on the line, but fuck, like it's crazy, you know. Like I was talking to my partner about like YouTubers getting canceled and stuff, and it's like hopefully that never even, you know, we never even get into that territory whatsoever, unless if of course like we do something horrible, which, you know, I hope that never happens. But looking at some of those things and about like some of the degrees that people have been canceled over that I don't necessarily feel like were warranted, you know, or were just like so overkill or taken out of context. And I don't know, it's pretty interesting to see like the mob mentality behind some of those things. And again, I have to be careful with saying that because in some cases it's deserved. Some people should be canceled and all that. But, you know, in terms of like context and in terms of like especially things like comedy, or in terms of things of like just misspeaking or anything, I do find it to be pretty interesting about how there's that relationship between like the community and how people take that, and then like the consequences of saying something, right?
Well, I guess it's interesting. It kind of goes back to that point we were talking about how the internet has kind of democratized the flow of information, and it's now allowed people that are oppressed to just say no, you know?
Right.
And
It's,
when enough of those people say no, somebody gets canceled.
and you brought up a really good point, and that's why I'm pulling up chat. You know, I was reading Yoku's comment about about their impact on how they discuss things, and about, you know, saying bad things and whatnot. But I feel like, and this is what I've talked with my partner about, but I feel like if you represent a minority, you get to decide how to deal with that. You know, it would be one thing if I said, you know, from a person that's, you know, pasty, to be like, well, they shouldn't feel bad because this and this and this and this, when I don't represent that community. I'm not a part of that community, and I don't have any, you know what I mean? Like, what am I standing on? Just my own personal feelings, which, okay, yeah, I can feel how I want to, but that doesn't mean that everybody should, you know, come and fall over there. But if it's like when somebody says something that's funny in their circle because they get it, right? But if I were to say it, just learning about it, it wouldn't have the same impact, and it could be seen as disrespectful because I don't, you know. I think even something like, you know, when you said, when you're like, hey, you should say, how's it? You know, I was like, I didn't even know if that was okay to say. And I don't mean that in like a mean way or anything, but I was like, I'm not even South African. And I feel like that's almost like, you know, culture vulture.
Like, I totally get that now. Like, because, you know, when you said that, is that okay for me to say? I'm like, of course, you know, because that's the way we greet people. But then, like, you're right, you know, like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, it's hard to catch it all. It's hard to, like, you know, just be so socially aware of everyone's feelings and everybody's, you know, personal things or whatever. But that's why I, like, say the accountability part, right? Of being like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I will, you know what I mean, try not to do that. I hope I don't get canceled for that. I don't plan on being canceled in the future by any means or whatever. But just in the sense of the degree of reactions and stuff. And the only reason why I bring it up with you is because you and I are YouTubers. That's what we do. And this kind of thing isn't prevalent, but it does happen to people. And, you know, I'm kind of wondering if, come on guys, let me break it down for you. A greeting and saying hello isn't gatekeeped. Well, shit, I don't know. Like it's like saying it is though. It is not being gatekeeped.
It kind of makes me cringe, like seeing like like seeing people that are like not like, for example, like maybe not Japanese, like getting like speaking in it and that kind of thing.
Right.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it kind of just makes me think, like, like, does that need to be done, or is that not maybe like a bit insensitive or something like that?
Let me put it to you this way. White guy.
Like the whole tattoo thing, and it's probably like the word that it's not.
Let me just keep my shirt on.
I don't know for shit. That's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm an outside observer, But
No,
it's something that, like, for me, it's been a bit of a slippery slope and a subject that I haven't really want to touch with on my channel, because with Psytrance, there's a lot of cultural appropriation. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People wearing clothes that might be seen as disrespectful, or people using like religious chants from cultures in their music and stuff like that, might be seen as disrespectful. But it's something that me as a Psytrance artist, I can't. It's difficult for me to speak on, because it's such an ingrained part of the musical culture that
Right.
It's like, how does me standing on my own fight up against a whole culture? At the same time, I can have an opinion and just be myself at the end of the day, I don't have to
Right.
fight.
Well, and not only that, but Zane says, like, there's a difference between culture appropriation and linguistics, and I agree with that, but sometimes knowing which one is what is not so obvious, and that's kind of like the discussion point of that. But yeah, I didn't want to spend too much time on that whole aspect of things, but I do think that it was kind of cool to talk about, just because obviously your channel has been around way longer than mine, but also, like, we are kind of finding ourselves in a position, not where we're being scrutinized or whatever, but in a matter of like, hey, people listen to us. And so, I think that with great power comes great responsibility. So you have to, be mindful of these things and try to also send the right message. And I know that you are somebody that does that. So it's interesting to kind of just get your perspective on it. Not like, hey, has someone tried to cancel you today? If not, when? That's not what I'm getting at. But moving on from that, if that's okay with you, I do kind of wonder, like, your role as an educator, because, like, we've talked a lot about, like, the music side of you, but as an educator, what do you hope to, like, leave with people, especially with knowing that, like, I'm not sure if you teach private lessons or not, but just from a sense of, like, here is me sending a message to the world in the format of a video, and hopefully they get, something out of that. I'm wondering if you have a goal, or if you have, like, an objective, or even if you feel like you have a responsibility to teach.
So I think it's there's a bit of I guess there's also different formats that I kind of approach when making my videos and that kind of thing. I don't actually do one-on-one private lessons. I just feel like the time is better spent using that 1 hour, the own individual using that hour to fulfill whatever they need. And I can help them in that hour if they do need, like, for example, like, I do have like a Patreon thing, which Inner Circle Discord group, where they, like, if they're like, oh, what setting do you use on kick 2 for the top pitch kind of thing, and I'll just select this one, and it'll just be like a quick response thing. And I feel like that is so much more powerful than me sitting there for an hour with the person, because then they could just get the thing, finish the information, get back to their project, and carry on doing their thing. I feel like that's a lot more constructive.
Yeah. Well, let me interrupt you for just a quick second. Again, apologize. Not trying to be rude, but you do have a Patreon. Do you want to tell us what that's about? And I'm also curious as to, please answer that first question, and then I'm also curious as to what made you choose Patreon for a way for people to support you versus any other platform like YouTube memberships.
Okay, yeah. So going back to the other question about doing the videos, so I think my goal first and foremost is to inspire people. So even if I do like a plugin demo, I'll try put something in there that's gonna be way beyond that plugin. Does that make sense? It's gonna be like, you know what? I want to make a sound that sounds like this fucking weird thing that this guy made, you know, and or something like that. You know what I mean? Because I feel like that's often lacking in tutorials and that kind of thing. They're very bland. It's like, this is the setting that I set my compressor to get the kick, and the dude who's making the tutorial even looks sad while he's doing it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And he's like, just set your ratio to 2, put the threshold of minus 14 dB. It's fine, perfect kick. You know, and then the tutorial's are over. And I feel like those are so unconducive, because most of the time when you're watching the tutorial, you're not going to use that information literally value for value. Do you know what I mean? At least when I watch a tutorial, like when I watched that FM4 tutorial that you did, I'm not making a neuro bass, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I was making Psytrance fart leads, you know?
Yeah. Well,
but like I watched the video and I was like, you know what? I'm inspired now to go and make the wettest fart sound that I've ever made before. And I did it and I was stoked, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's Oh, I guess you caught it. I was just going to type out bye to him, but much love, dude. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming in. And guys, go check out Zane's thing. Hey, yeah, I'll just leave. Do you want me to leave a link to the Discord and then I can just put it in the announcements, or just send me a message and I'll figure out how you want to promote that, and I'm more than happy to do that. Saturate Records is him and Cage and all of those guys. So I just adore them, and I love like being a part of whatever it is that they're doing. So I love to kind of promote that. Same thing with you and like your Patreon and all those things. And like, use my channel, do that, because you have amazing resources on that matter. Now, regarding what you just said, something that I got from my martial arts teacher, which we have an interview on about cultivating creativity and stuff, it is Saturate is its own thing. But you know what I mean though, right? Like, you know what I mean? But you don't come to learn the skill, you come to learn from the skill. And in the same sense, you don't come to learn the video, you come to learn from the video. And you describing what you just did is exactly that. You didn't come to copy the patch, you came to say, well, what is this person doing and what is this thought process behind it? And now, how can I use that to interpret into my own sound design world, or my own creative world, I think would be a better way to describe that. And that's something that I personally hope to give to people, because at the end of the day, the neurobass itself, it's just a sound, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. But the processing behind things, the understanding of mechanics about how, two simple things are put together is what fascinates me. And that's why I love watching your channel, because I'm not saying that you teach like me or that I teach like you, but you understand that. And that's a fundamental thing about teaching, in my opinion, is trying to give somebody something beyond the end result.
Absolutely. Because I mean, if you break it down, the information, the value, like the actual information itself is useless without the will to put it into practice, And I feel like us as content creators or tutorial makers or whatever, it's our responsibility to impart that will onto the people. Otherwise, they're just going to sit on YouTube and watch hours and hours and hours.
Do anything, yeah.
Exactly. I want to be that video that makes them go, listen, I'm fucking minimizing this and I'm getting into my Bitwig and I'm doing this, or I'm getting into my, you know what I mean? Like, I'm inspired now. I think that for me is like the job number one.
I think that's an amazing goal to have. And I think that you do it really well. And I think that's part of what makes this community so great, is having people like that, like yourself and the other people that I talk to. Data does that to me all the time. I'll watch something that he's doing and I'll be like, oh shit, I could do that. Well, let me go skate over here and just pull it up on the side and then start fiddling with it and then find something new. And that's what it's all about. And that's why I love that we've kind of broken open the door of gatekeeping of information in the world of music, kind of like how we talked about off stream, because you can't stop it. You can't, like, no matter what, and you don't want to. Like, why would you want to stop potential from getting better? And the people, like, the music market is already oversaturated. So the idea that somebody is going to steal your sound and then they're going to, like, if anything, it's like, oh, somebody used my sound and it sounds fucking dope. Nice job. You know what I mean? And 9 times out of 10, at least the people that I talk to, they usually are like crediting towards the person that they got it from. Thank you so much for doing that with me. You didn't even have to do that. But, if I learn something about drums or whatever, I'm like, Cage, DMTR, Copycat, all the people that I learned all the cool sound design tricks from. And I love celebrating them from that because they are part of a community that has made me a better like musician and a better creative, and ultimately like and indirectly like a better person from that, because it instills good intent and it instills good practice on how to share information and how to help us all grow together as musicians. Now, there is a balance between that, and that's what we talked about too, right? Like, I think that because we also fill that role of like trying to do this for a living, I do think that there is some ethics of like, if you just teach me something and then I make a video on it like immediately and I don't even like half understand it, that's one thing. But I think that, there is that line that you can cross of like understanding something and turning it into your own and then repurposing it or like giving it out within your own interpretation of it, I think is the best way to say that. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to welcome. Zane taught me a trick the other day about like how to make like really cool like impact basses and stuff, or like how to make those matter. And I was just like, and I was talking to him about the same thing. I was like, that would be so rude of me just to be like, oh, hey everybody, here's a brand new tutorial on how to make impact basses. And I'm like, that shouldn't be me teaching that. That should be the person that taught me. Zane doesn't do tutorials or anything, but that's what I'm talking about. Now, maybe down the future, if I can find a way to improve it, I think that would make more sense. But that's just my own personal opinion too, though, right? About just being respectful to the information. Do you have any opinions on that? Or, sorry, I rambled.
No, no worries, no worries. I think for me, it's a bit of a balance because, it's like I've seen tutorials by people that are copy pastes of my tutorials, and they don't credit me. But at the end of the day, it's like the information didn't actually come from me. Maybe I saw it somewhere else. And
right.
Does that make sense? I think that information is like energy. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's developed, and culture crafts this knowledge over decades, and it's passed on from one producer who then broken telephones it a little bit and passes it on to another one who then makes a video about it, who then inspires 10,000 people who change it a little bit, and now there's 5 different subgenres that make use of this thing, and now it's, you know what I mean? So as much as sometimes I look at the thing and I'm like, that dude definitely copy pasted me, and on one hand it's like, I'm kind of flattered because I've obviously made an impression big enough for that to happen. But at the same time, I'm sure 100% guaranteed that I've perhaps done that to somebody else. Obviously not knowingly, but I always feel like the information that I've crafted over the years, I didn't always just find by trial and error. It's often inspired by either another YouTuber, maybe not even a music YouTuber, some other random shit that I was watching or whatever,
No, I totally agree. And again, I think that there is a line behind that too, though, right? Because maybe it's not the information itself that's unique, but it's the perspective behind it that I think is what becomes valuable, and to say that, somebody invented something or did this or whatever, of course, is kind of just silly to think about in hindsight, right? Because it's all been done before. At the same time, when somebody tries to like put your words in their own mouths, I think that's kind of a different story where I'm kind of like, well, it's like, what are you doing? Are you just trying to, piggyback? And I would have a lot more respect. I'm not going to go out and attack somebody, but I have a lot more respect for the person or for the content creator if they put themselves into it rather than just, parroting is what we call it in martial arts. But I agree with you, like I don't control the information. I'm not the shareholder behind that, and nobody is, but it's kind of just almost like an etiquette thing. I feel you're going to make a lot more friends. Yeah. You're going to make a lot more friends giving credit and like be to me a lot more respectable by just being like dismissive of like, oh, here's something that's, that you guys will enjoy, or here's something that's cool. And here's where I got it from, because then that like there's so many benefits to that. If I say I got something from you, I want to say that to be like, go check out his channel, you know, and then in turn, hey, Alchemy sent me over here, and then we both win. And it's like, why would you not do that?
Yeah, totally. I think it just boils down to the whole accountability thing. You know, I think some people, their intent behind it is to steal that information and put it up and to build their own reputation on somebody else's piggyback or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, they can't sustain that because the person that they're stealing from is putting out information quicker.
Exactly. At a
And
more
the
consistent
person,
rate.
exactly. So 9 times out of 10, piggybackers it's not sustainable anyway, and they learn that quickly, and they then craft their own way and stuff like that. So I think those types you can see very quickly in the fact that they often their work is not consistent, and it's only ever when somebody else puts out something and that kind of thing. And also, you know, also going back to like a story that I actually posted a video about like maybe 2-3 years ago or something, about a guy who I don't know if you know Ectoplasm. It's like an old free music portal that was like only wave quality. It was the shit. Like only wave quality, really high quality stuff. I don't think it exists anymore. But it was mainly for psychedelic music. They had lots of down tempo and dub and chill out and that kind of stuff as well. But anything kind of avant-garde, psychedelic, that kind of stuff. But I had released an album on Ectoplasm for free, and it charted, and some idiot basically just downloaded it and then re-uploaded it to SoundCloud and started building a following that way. And he obviously couldn't release music at a rate fast enough than any of the other producers in the industry. So he's kind of almost just doing himself a disservice by not putting in the effort, you know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, I wasn't really that pissed off with him. I mean, yeah, it was like, what the fuck are you doing? Dude, you're just wasting your own time here, you know?
Yeah.
And all it ended up doing was funneling all the people that he had built up to me. So he had basically built up a nice big crowd and then just sent it to me. Because those people were now looking for the content that he was stealing from me. And then they found out where the source was, and they all went there, you know?
Yeah. I was just kind of reading up on chat. Hi, Carl. And I agree with you, Das. So people being unprepared, which is ironic because I actually don't edit my videos anymore. I just go. I cannot stand editing. And like I tried doing the like How to Bite series where it's like funny and has all this shit and whatever, and it was like got like 500 views, and I'm like, if I'm gonna get 500 views regardless of what I put up, I might as well just do it from scratch and be like, here, it's almost more respectable to be like, here's nothing, let's do this together, because it's like,
I think I edit my videos more and more now for my own self-consciousness, just because like I have certain it's probably not noticeable when you're just listening to me like chat now, but like I have certain, I don't want to say speech impediments, but I have like crutch words which I put in places because my brain is still processing things. Does that make sense? So like does that make sense? Yeah. That's one of them.
I do.
And
that
so
too.
People that watch a lot of my videos, they'll listen to me and like say these crutch words a lot, and they will make it known to me. They'll be like, dude, stop saying this word. So then I get all like self-conscious about it. So I'm like, fuck, now I go and edit my videos and I remove every time I say the word. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, I used to do that. Like I would take out all of the ums, I would take out all of the breaths, and sometimes it would kind of like break the flow of the video itself, but you know, whatever. But to be honest, there's also something to be said for just being organic and just communicating in its rawest form, because that means that it is live, that means that it is there. And you know, I have a lot of respect for your edits. I love your edits, and they're funny, and they, you know what I mean, and they're very well done, and I love that stuff. And you might also be like in a different category of like where you are in your YouTube journey to warrant that kind of thing. For me personally, I guess like I never expect any of my videos to do well. That's not where I actually like make any significant like impact anymore anyways. It's not based off of my tutorials or videos. That's why I just do streaming. So I'm like, oh well, here's an idea, and if you really want to learn it, you're going to learn it. If you don't want to learn it, then whatever. It's
the thing is, you are going to kick yourself though when you do make that one video that hits that million and you say 10,000 awkward words in it. Trust me, like I've got one video that I don't want to say went viral, but like it's my like outstander. Does that make sense? It's like over 100K views. Like it's the one video on my channel that really outperformed, and it's my worst video I've ever made. It's embarrassing.
I mean, my video, it was an hour long. It's got over 100K. That's the only video that's ever gotten anywhere close to that, and it's a comprehensive guide to neurobase. And if anything, I'm like, people are still watching that video, and I'm like, it's been redone so many times, way better, of like, not even like the quality of the production value, but just of like the depth of knowledge, and it's been condensed in a way that's so much more streamlined. And I'm just like, go watch that. But I don't know. I don't think it matters. I think for me, the information is what's important. And if you have to stumble
So weird
upon,
how that works. I like the one thing will just do it.
Yeah. If you have to stumble upon a few, missteps of does that make sense? Or I feel like, or how do I say that's mine a lot? Or if that makes sense, actually is something I use a lot too. But, it's almost like it goes right by you because you're focused on what the subject is. Like if you're teaching in a real world environment. But yeah, in any case, I think that you also have, for you in particular, you have an editing style, right? You have a format about how you structure things, and I actually like that. Do you even like editing though? Or I dream of when I can hire an editor. I would fucking love that, because the output that I would do for tutorials would be so much higher. But yeah, until that ever happens, I'm not, sorry guys. Unless if it's just like a terrible video, then I'd rather refilm it.
I guess I do. Like it's something that at first it was like, oh, this is kind of annoying, and then as I started putting more work into it, I started appreciating certain things. So like one parallel that I want to draw, which I don't actually like, it's unfair because I don't think my content can compare. But like if you look at, for example, like Venus theory stuff, I feel like a lot of the finesse in his videos don't get appreciated until you really start to break it down.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like
I agree.
The way he cuts scenes, the way he's scripted his stuff, and it's just like, it's perfect. Does that make sense?
I agree.
And the more you really dive in and trying to create the perfect video, the more you appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. And it's like, and then you start like, when you edit things more, you start to look at it more like, now I'm doing micro edits in a drum loop. You know what I mean? Like I want this to be perfect because now people are, they're relating to it as if they would my music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yo, Saturate, what's good? Saturate Records, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us.
Speak of the devil.
Right. Hey, if you want to tell everybody, I'm not sure if I'm talking to Thomas or whoever is behind that, but feel free to plug in what you guys are doing tomorrow. I told Zane to do it. Damn, I missed it. That's fine.
Hey, Cider.
Hey, Cider, what's good? What I was going to say regarding that, though, is it also depends on, again, like what kind of message you want to give to people, right? So what I love about Venus Theory, and he actually told me this personally, was that he is really big on doing exactly what you described, which is storytelling through his videos. So you're not just getting the information, you are getting an experience, and I love that he has the wherewithal to do that. I think for me, it's always been, hey, Silent State, it's always been about the music for me and about, like, use this information and go back to your DAW, like you're banished, go back to your room. And so when I do things personally, I don't really care so much about, like, at least not anymore, because there's also an efficiency aspect of it, right? If I can get the idea across in 3-minute videos without any editing, then I can upload more frequently, and I can also focus on what I want to do, which is make music. But if I'm putting all this time and effort into, like 2 hours or something, or 3 hours into recording the information, editing the information, doing the tags, doing the business side of things, the administrative shit, and then it has a turnout of like 300 views, to me that's just inefficient when I get the same output or the same amount of engagement for just putting the information out there. And so I don't know, do you ever struggle with that? Or like, do you feel like your edits or like your more edited videos do better overall? Because my experience has been, well, exactly what I described.
it's something that the analytics can never tell you, I guess. But I feel like it's like an impression thing,
Mm.
you know. If so, like if I go back and I like check out like some of the older videos, some of my first videos and stuff on my channel, before you know anything about like photography which is crazy because like when I was at school, like I did photography as a subject, so I have no excuse, but like I still did everything wrong in terms of those aspects, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
composition and stuff. I'd be like down here in the corner of the camera, and then the whole room is empty around me, you know what I mean? And stuff like that, you know. And then as you learn more, you become more aware of these things, and it doesn't mean that that video that you made, it doesn't have valid information and it's not going to do well. But there's a difference when you look at a person doing that level of video, and like I was when I started, and when you look at, for example, Venus Theory with his fucking sick looking lens on his sick camera in his really nice looking lighted room, it just
Right.
makes this impression that this dude is successful. Do you know what I mean? And I know it's like it's materialistic things. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, music is a lot about delivering quality, and it's about understanding what it takes to have quality and having a sense of taste, or you know what I mean? And if you look at an image that looks low and pixelated and stuff like that, and as an artist you can't discern that it's not
Right.
professional or whatever the case is, it's just gonna it's going to give people a bad impression that maybe you can't hear the difference between MP3 and wave, or they're going to make any assumption that they can to kind of paint you into their pre-exposed bias or whatever it is.
No,
So I feel like, you know, especially now as an artist, there's so many other artists out there, and it's like there's so much competition and stuff that like you got to do every little thing that you can to make that first impression count, you know.
yeah, and it's interesting too though, because I think that Cam has done a really amazing thing, which has broadened his audience, and I think that as a business, from a business standpoint, that's the most successful thing you can do, right? Um, and I think that we can all take notes from that as well. I think that for me, as far as a priority list, though, and this was something that I talked to Aiden or Cage about when he was talking to me about doing content creation and stuff, was I was like, man, your music is so good that because of the quality of the audio, from the audio perspective of like how that stuff is and just the way that he tells stories through his music and all that, I feel like that would cater towards the primary audience that I would want to reach out to myself. And so for me, my thing is like, I just want to make my music sick and as cool as it can be, so that way when I do a tutorial and I play a tune or something like that, that's what's going to capture people's attention. That's what's going to be like, oh, this dude fucking knows what he talks about. Because one thing I was going to ask you from earlier was whether or not you ever have that imposter syndrome of, or being into one of those typical things of like, hey, um, dude, I love Cage. Like, I adore him. But what I was gonna say is like, if you ever wonder about being a YouTuber that just does YouTube but like makes shitty music, and like that's subjective, right? Because there's no shitty music, but you get what I'm saying, right? That makes like really lazy, just put together, you know, like very little effort, all that stuff, and it's like, check out the sick beat I made, and it's like, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna teach you how to make that, and then you're just kind of like, next.
I guess it's tough, you know, as a YouTuber or as like a personality or whatever online, is we're kind of exposing ourselves to judgment in a way. And a large portion of that, yeah, it comes from ourselves, but also like negative comments you remember them a lot more because they impact you, for example. Like, so it can sort of build this kind of skewed sense of self-worth as an artist, because of that, you know what I mean? And it happens with people who are in the limelight and stuff like that,
Right.
you know, quite often. And I think it's it helps, I guess, because we have the ability to go back and see how we've grown
Right.
as an artist, which really, really helps, you know. And I feel like, you know, in the bigger industry, you don't really have so much of that, you know. Like if you look at like an actor, for example, you know, from day one they were acting a role until the day that they went crazy or they snapped or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that progression as an actor. Do you know what I mean? Whereas as an individual on the internet, you can see like, okay, I got better when I posted this, and I got better over the course of the few years. So as much as you put yourself like out there to be judged, and you judge yourself, there's always the ability to, and it's actually a healthy thing. It's important to see how far you've come, you know.
Yeah, I guess like in that sense though, like, and I think that that's how you keep an audience, I would say, if that's okay to describe. I definitely think that if you can capture somebody or they choose to stick with you and they watch you over time, like somebody that I've been actually watching very closely, like not in a bad way or anything, but I've been watching Artifact grow from when he started versus what he's doing, and I'm having a good time just watching his sound design improve, watching his videos improve, because he obviously is really passionate about what he does. And I think that he's a nice person. He doesn't know who I am, but you know what I mean? Just as somebody who watches YouTube, I'm like, oh shit, dude. Yeah, keep doing your thing. And maybe here's a helpful comment once in a while. I will say though, as far as like making an impression though, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. And one thing about Cam is that he has the storytelling aspect of it, right? Especially with the production value. And it's not just the nice camera. It's not just the nice lighting. It's the way that he speaks and the way that he tells the story and organizes that. I guess for me, and it's actually something that I feel like you're stepping into as well, because you already have the music, and that's something that I recognized about you before we even started talking. I was like, damn, your music is just it. Okay, I'll listen to whatever you have to say. You don't even have to be on camera, or you could be like, yo, here's this thing, because you know what you're doing. And for me, I'm trying to get myself to a place that I'm happy with that, so that way I can lean on that first, as in people recognize me as a musician first, or as a producer or sound designer or whatever first, so that way I use that as the foundation to build all the other aesthetic things upon. I've tried different things. Like I've tried you being like, oh hey, I'm gonna go do tricking stuff and do backflips to my own beats, or you know, I'm gonna do something that's like, I've done some cooking videos and shit or whatever, and tried a few different things. But I think until I get to that point, that would be the priority for me, and that could just be that like I'm just not at where you guys are yet on your musical journey or on your level. And I don't mean that to downplay myself. I don't mean that as like, you know, a self-deprecating thing, just as a matter of where the priority lies. Of I want to impress you with my music. I want to put on a banger and be like, I made that, and I'm going to show you how to do it, because that's what I think is going to be the most authentic, at least for me as a person.
Cider, I've got good news for you, dude. I've actually finally got a new oven. Dude, my stove has been on the blink for fucking years, so that cooking stream I promised is going to happen.
Cooking videos 101.
Oh,
Maybe we can
cupcakes.
like, maybe you and I can have a bake off sometime, you know? Like I challenge you for
Dude, totally.
Let's go, a brownie cook off.
It's so baked. Oh, you mean baking thing? Okay.
No, shit, whatever you want to do, right? So like whatever you want to do, I don't judge. That's all up to you. But for me, I'm in it for the sweets and the sugar. No, so like I actually don't personally like do any of that stuff, because it makes me very unsafe to myself. So I'm just like, because I start hating my life. It takes me weeks to feel like I'm normal again after doing anything. And I'm just like, man, this is not for me. I would rather just like make music that makes me sound like I'm crazy than actually be crazy. Or maybe I am crazy and that's why I shouldn't do drugs, which is why I don't do drugs. But, you know, or smoke weed or drink or any of that shit. Because I'm just like, man, I regret this. This was a bad decision. And it always like, I don't know how we got on the subject of that, but yeah, personally, that's not my thing. Have you successfully used any of that stuff to like fuel your creativity? I wonder, like you don't have to tell me anything that you did, but that can just be as simple as a yes or no question.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like a large portion of understanding the psychedelic sound comes from opening the doors of perception, but that doesn't always have to come from substance. One can achieve opening the doors of perception through even just being in an intense trance situation from dancing, and that's why, for me, like, that's how I experienced the trance the first time, was just a proper organic experience. You know what I mean? But so in South Africa, cannabis is legal for recreational use. And sometimes it does help to kind of like calm the self-indecisiveness, put it that way, and just, let things flow. It can help to kind of get out of that kind of notion. But it is dangerous because obviously it can become a crutch. And it can also lead to thoughts of paranoia and that kind of thing.
Right, which is exactly how I get, even just on the smallest bit. And I've tried before, in like really small increments, and I'm just like, telling you all my personal experience about it. But I, tried that, and before I even started music, I tried to go do like tricking stuff, and I had no idea where I was, and it scared the shit out of me. I tried to do a backflip, and I was like, I completely forgot everything that I knew about air awareness, about all the, lift your leg, go up, jump, spinny, blah, blah, blah. And like, I just ate shit a lot. And like, that had such a big negative impact on me that I was like, I never want to do that again. And then a few years later, I tried it, and I was like, well, maybe I could use this for music or something. But I just found myself like staring, of just being like, it's kind of funny to think about, but literally the thoughts that went into my head were, why do you do like you don't like tricking, you don't like music, nobody likes it. What are you even doing? Like, you suck. This is terrible. You're a bad person. And I'm just like, sitting here trying to battle this mentally of being like, I know that I'm just baked. I know that this isn't real. But like, having that voice in your head be so prevalent, I was like, this is just so unpleasant. Fuck that. I've been there with the tricking and the other stuff. Yeah, man. And yeah, because you b-boy, right? So, it's like if you're trying to windmill or something, but like you lose sight of where the floor is, and then you just like smack your face on the floor. Windmill is like when you're on the floor and your legs are going up like that.
Yes, I've seen that one.
Yeah, I'm sure that everybody knows what this one is. Not to be confused with the flare, which is that one. There's the windmill, which is like that one.
I think I was thinking of the flare.
Yeah, the flare is when you're on your arms and your legs are going around. Yeah. Describing breakdancing is pretty funny. But no, I do think that's interesting. Yeah, in any case, Dash, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I was wondering, do you have any questions for me, or was there anything else that you wanted to discuss, or anything that I missed? Also, hey, Reactor, again, please feel free to like plug in your socials.
Hey, Reactor B.
I put your links to the description of how you guys can support Dash in the description. He just dropped an album not too long ago, like maybe 2 months ago. And it's really good, and you owe it to yourself to at least go listen to it. But yeah, did you have anything else, or anything that you wanted to discuss?
So I wanted to get back to that point we were talking about before. We talked about baking.
Sorry.
No worries. That was my fault. I derailed it. About how I can't even remember my thought process on it, but it was about like, sometimes the impression of one's art can be because they've delivered it in a certain way. So, for example, like you were saying that you liked the album and you like my music, and I totally appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, but like a lot of, I mean, this is again like it could be a self-deprecating thought, but I think a lot of the impression of music nowadays is in the delivery of it. You know what I mean? So like, I think it's because it's my channel with tutorials, because there's a cool video and that kind of thing. You kind of have this impression that it's a professional thing or whatever, rather than just a SoundCloud mix. You know what I mean?
Right.
And because there's the sense of like, I don't really post my stuff on SoundCloud, and the only way you can go listen to it is there. So it kind of funnels all the views there. There's this kind of expanded like impression, I guess. And not to discredit my own art, but I think that idea of the entire package is so important to music nowadays. Whether it's just a cool visualizer that's like appealing to the eye or not. I think it's actually so fucking important. And I'll tell you something that's probably like a not the most flattering thing for my own ego, but more people have commented on the quality of the album art than they have on the music.
I can
So
see
like
that.
so it's very much got to do with like there's a cool quality image. It's the package is quality. There's value to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does beg the
I'm not saying that
question.
the music is bad, but it's just about everything. I would say put the same amount of effort, or okay, not maybe the same amount of effort because we put too much effort, but like balance it evenly. Like put 50% effort into producing the music and mixing it and mastering it. Put 25% into the delivery, and then put 25% into promoting it and just telling people about it and talking about it and that kind of thing. And that 25% of effort put into the delivery of it is going to like just push that impression beyond. It's no longer just going to be really good music. Now it's
Polish, right?
thing.
For sure. I guess
Totally.
and I like you gave me plenty of examples that I think were like specific, but I wonder if there's a more general perception that you have on like, and this is actually for all of you as well. What makes a producer professional?
Are they making a living?
Is it just about the money? Is it, you know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
it's a profession. If you look at the etymology of the word again, like it's if it's your profession.
getting paid,
And
yes.
so like, yeah, that's it. Unfortunately, like as bad as it sounds, like a professional means he's making a living. And the irony is most of the people that we consider to be like professional, like even the Backstreet Boys, going back to the conversation earlier, like they barely made a living. Like, okay, yeah, it's a lot of money that they made, but like it's not a sustainable thing.
Yeah, I hear you. Oh, maybe I asked the wrong question because I like Data Bros' way that he phrased it really well. What would you
Yes. Yeah,
consider
yeah.
to be professional quality? Sorry about that.
So for me, do you mean like a physical aspect?
Why? What is it
Like
about? Let's say you're watching someone on content creation, right? Like, what is it that what are, like, in general, not just, because it doesn't have to be all those things. It could be what we talked about before, right? Like the examples of the music quality, the visual aesthetics, the storytelling, or whatever. But what is it for you and the rest of you that makes you want to say, I want to listen to that person?
Oh, it's a difficult question. I guess it's the impression, and do they deliver consistently? Is there value in it? I think going back to those things we talked about a little bit earlier again.
Yeah, yeah.
I think again for me, just using Venusteria as another example, it's not about just that his one video that he posted is really well edited. It's that he consistently delivers
All of them.
beast content. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so every time you go, you're going to walk away with some inspiration or at least some entertainment.
Yeah, and that was going to lead up to my
You know
next
what I mean?
question with that thought. Again, sorry for interrupting, but just before you go on to that, what do you find? You say like deliver value, right? So what is value? What is value to you personally? Like, let's say when you are again looking at something like that, and again, like these are all questions that we have already kind of like talked about and discussed. But I think that like kind of putting it on a piece of paper, and redefining that, because these things that we talk about are the same values that you and I put into our content creation, right? They're the same things that we think about whenever we're trying to be on the other side. Because for me, like, of course, like, and for you as well, I would want every single video to be like, that's the one, that's the one, that's the one, that's the one, ideally, right? But I ask myself that all the time of like, what value am I giving to people as far as a means of like why I want them to watch them and what compels them to come back. And I guess I kind of just wanted that from your perspective as well. And I've already asked you that question, but from the opposite side.
it's a tough one. I think it's in terms of the music side of things. I think having some sort of theme or some kind of identifiable thing that is going to be memorable and that's going to lead to that return value. You know what I mean? So one example is like during one of my streams, I was busy sound designing, and like I made a sound that sounded like Stephen Hawking going with like a Foreman filter, and it became like a joke in the chat. Everyone was like, oh shit, you know. And so that moment where that sound was made became like a moment, you know. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to create a track around that, you know, build up to that moment where it's like and so everybody who was in the chat that time, they know that moment, and so that track has that return value for them. So when they want to like remember that time that they had a good time with me in the chat and that whole thing, it's like, I guess it's those little things that you can't really plan, but sometimes the theme just kind of falls into place. And it could be, you know, remixing like Cider knows. It could be like remixing the Metal Gear Solid menu music or whatever the case is, you know, and that's going to hit those Metal Gear Solid fans, you know.
So it's funny that you mentioned that. The end of existentialism on my first EP, if you get the chance, go listen to the outro of that and see what you can pick out if you're a Metal Gear fan. Sorry, that was just really cool for you to mention that. Metal Gear is one of my favorite things ever. But I do think that, like, with that though, these are good questions that don't even necessarily have to warrant an answer, you know, and don't even necessarily have to be definitive. It's just a thing of like, you know, what is it that we're trying to give to people? What is it that we hope for them to take away? And how do we continue to like bring more value from ourselves as content creators or as musicians or as producers and stuff? Because obviously, like, if we're just putting things in plain like English or plain language rather, we want people's attention. That's what it is. And so for me, I ask myself the question of like, how do I earn people's attention versus like, you know, how do I go viral, or how do I do that? How do I make somebody feel like they have that value? And because even for you, you know, like when you and I hop off of this, I asked for your attention and thank you so much for, like, you know what I mean, giving me the conversation, and I had a great time today. But I want you to take something positive away from that and have something like, I want to do this again because I made a friend, you know? So I'm constantly asking myself those kinds of questions in regards to how do we take this and then make it better, you know? How do we have a discussion over something and how do we make it better? Or how do I top the last video that I just did? How do I make that more valuable? And I think that those are healthy things to ask, that as long as it's just like a healthy question, right? Not, I suck and I can't, you know, my best life work has already come out or whatever and I'm donezo. But no, I think, let me just brag about you for a sec, if that's okay. Turn your mic off. No, I'm just kidding. But something that I love about Dash's channel is that, like, for one, I really love the way that you teach, and something that I've noticed that has been consistent is that your quality of music, again, your mixing and just the ideas that you create are hella consistent, and I'm like not envious even, but like kind of just admire it, you know, of having an output. And I know that you guys in chat know what I'm talking about. Like, you know that when, you know, Dash makes a new video and he's got a demo, it's going to be like, oh yeah, this is going to be sick, you know? And I feel like if I can get into what you made and be like, that was dope, I'll watch the whole thing. That's how it is for me. And I don't care about if you edit the video or not, but if you have a cool demo video or like a cool demo track and you're just like, and I'm just like, oh shit, this is sick. Like, I'll watch the whole thing because I want to know how you did it, you know? But that's also me and how I learn and how I try to come into learning sound design or learning production, because that's what I'm here for. And some people just want to be entertained.
I guess it's also, it could be down to, like, you know, I've earned the viewers' trust in a previous video, so they're more likely to stick around to watch, you know. But it's also something that I've noticed that works fucking well is explain the whole video in the first 10 seconds, show a cool sound, and then carry on.
Right.
It's something that I sometimes forget to do, but that is like the formula, is like explain the video within 10 seconds, show a really cool sound, and then carry on. explaining your whole life story. Like I always have a whole life story in the beginning, and then I forget. Like just hook them in that first 10 seconds. I'll
Yeah,
go on and on and on, and then just forget that one key fact. Like 10 seconds, hook them, sound, then you're cool.
or at least
Because if you
like
show them that really cool sound right in the beginning, they're like, I want to stick around to know how that was made.
right. And also like you said, that's part of the delivery aspect, right? That's a delivery trick of like, for me, I like to play sometimes of like, yo, I never seen this shit before. And then like creating the unexpected or something, and being funny in that way. But at the same time, if you do these things from scratch, you might not have that. It might not be there. So you can put a timestamp in the description, or you can say, hey, I don't know what's going to come out, but here's a journey, and there's all that. I find that about 4 minutes is how long I have to keep somebody. That's like the prime thing. If I can do it in 4 minutes, then people will stay. But anything after than that, like they start, or they skip around to just like try to find those things out. But for you and like the stuff that you do, I watched your entire video last night again, the one about FM4, and I was like, oh, what is he talking about? And I actually learned some really cool things about. I didn't even think that FM4 was strictly for FM, and then the phase modulation was supposed to be for PM. I just thought that those were just two different synthesizers. And it was like, oh, FM is typically from sine waves. Oh, that's why that's FM. That's why FM4 doesn't have anything other than sine waves. And I was like, oh shit, that's incredibly useful. So I wanted to watch the whole rest of the video because I kept learning as I went, and I was like, that's fucking sick. So that's cool shit to me. But I'm also that kind of person that's a lot like you, in the sense that I want to learn the shit, and I will stick around and sit here for hours if it means getting the information. And unfortunately, not everybody's like that. So I think that's why it's interesting to talk about like what your philosophy is on like keeping people's attention, or teaching, or being efficient as far as delivering information, or all the things that we discussed today. That was kind of a selfish conversation, but I do think it's interesting and inspiring for people that want to be content creators in the future, which I'll leave with that maybe, because it would be a good time to
Something
wrap
that
up.
I've also noticed, which has been really good. Sorry, I just want to interrupt. One last thing before we
No
wrap
worries.
up. Is I noticed like a lot of people will throw their eggs in a single basket and kind of like run with that for the future, where it's always important to kind of change things up a little bit as a content creator. And something that I've noticed works really well is you like you mentioned, you have those two types of viewers. You have those ones that just they've literally have 5 minutes of time because they only have 30 minutes that they can work on music before they have to get to their day job. So they only have 5 minutes, and it's very valuable. And so you have those types of viewers, but then you have the ones like me who I have the time to sit and find this really cool information that's going to inspire me to make my next tutorial. So I will sit and watch the hour-long video or whatever it takes,
I appreciate
and it's
you.
important to make content for both of those types of viewers. So
Yeah.
like, for example, like 3 times a month I'll release like a 10-minute video, and then once a month I'll release like a 30-minute video, and then once every few months I'll release like a several hour long 50 tips and tricks for Vital, like that
Okay.
kind of thing. I got one coming up. Yeah, actually not going to give it away.
Do you have 50 tips and tricks coming out for Vital coming out?
No. Like I did one for Vital, like my
Oh,
50.
okay.
It's one of my best performing videos of the last little while. It was like 50 tips and tricks for Vital. It was like 2 hours of just tips and tricks for Vital. And I was saying like I'm actually currently working on another one, and then I realized I'm going to stop myself because actually there's a curse. If you give away something that you're currently working on, the chances of it actually finishing diminish.
Yep. I know. Don't talk about it. Be about it. Right.
Totally. But I'm like almost there. So like I'm at the home stretch. So we're good.
You got it, dude. If you need help, like let me know, and I'll help you finish that. Just to counter the curse, right? I want to see you succeed. My instructor has this saying that your success is my success, and that's why I love putting people like you on here and just trying to like be like, hey, I want people to know who you are, because that's how that works. So I'll leave you with one more question, if that's okay. Some people in
Yes.
here are going to feel like shots have been fired, and I'm not trying to point you all out or say bad things to you, but what do you do, or what is your take when somebody says you should try different types of music, or you should change it up, or because like you're primarily like a Psytrance guy, so what do you do when people are like, you should make something outside of what you normally make, or you should be a different artist than who you project yourself to be?
I actually don't get it too often. Like sometimes, for example, like I'll be midstream and a track is like already banging and it just needs a couple of final touches, and then some guy will jump in and be like, "Hey, you should make some future step," or "You should make some deathcore," or whatever the next genre is going to be, you know. And it's
Yeah.
like I've already almost finished this track. What am I going to just suddenly start
Yeah,
a new one? You know what I
just stop. And,
mean? But
yeah.
I don't often get those with like, oh, you should do a tutorial on some obscure contemporary genre kind of thing. The thing that often like that I don't want to say annoys me, because like it's I kind of curated the why it happens. I created my own demise in this regard. In that, I get a lot of people that'll be like, "Hey, can you remake this sound?" And then they'll post a Psytrance track with the same sound that I've remade 100 times in fucking 100 videos before, and then they'll post a timestamp, and I'll be like, literally go watch the last video I've made. Is the exact thing you need there.
I
And so
had
I get
a
a lot of that, like the same sound over and over. Please do a tutorial for this specific artist, but it's the sound that I've already done before.
I'm
They
not
just
gonna
want it to be like, to take the sound that you've done and recreate the tutorial and just rename it as how to make XYZ, you know?
yeah, and I think that like I if you did that, I wouldn't blame you because of
Because that's
how
often like just people wanting to be spoon fed, you know what I mean? Whereas
right.
often like people will be like, hey, you should try out hyperpop, for example. Like I haven't heard much of it, so I mean I'm now intrigued. I actually want to go check it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as an
It
artist, sometimes those types of things can be intriguing and then lead to inspiration. But it's the ones that like, hey, can you make this sound that we've all made a billion times before, which is just a saw wave with a high pass filter, you know?
I've had somebody come into my Discord and be like, "Hey, do you guys know where I can find neuro tutorials?" And I'm not sure if they were trolling or if they just didn't know or what. And I'm not pointing them out. And I think that if it was memes, it was really funny. But the fact, like, I was just kind of like, "What? Like, bro, like it says alchemy neuro." Anyways, I think it was
Does
for
anybody
fun.
have a tutorial on how I can lick the spoon, please?
Yeah.
I'm
Again,
struggling after being spoon fed. I'm
again,
joking.
I don't want to assume because I don't know like what was
Yeah,
behind that or where that came from, but at the same time, it was funny enough to mention in this particular context. So I hope that person doesn't take it personal. It was just a matter of like I know what you mean, but I get that a lot and I don't know if it's because I've kind of dabbled in other genres or something, but a lot of times people are like I wish that you would like not make halftime. I'm like I wish that you would like make something other than neurobase and I'm like, "Well, okay, like what do you want me to do?" I don't know. I think that's just one of those things that I'm actually open to it, but a lot of times I'm like, look, I've got all these different genres and stuff that I've done in the past, and there's that, but I don't, I'm like really trying to focus on like developing myself in this particular aspect, and I always listen to what they say because sometimes they have really good suggestions, but at the same time, I'm like, I can't make everybody happy, but this is kind of like what I've kind of chosen, and this is what I like have set myself upon at least right now, and I can't, I'm not going to budge, I guess. Just for the sake of seeing because you want to see what I could do with it. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do that, but I don't necessarily mean that in a mean way. It's just like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not doing that to be rude. I'm doing that because I'm trying to like still find myself as an artist, I guess.
absolutely. Because I mean, if you break too far out of the box, yeah, Gambient. That was actually fun. I want to make. We still gonna make that a genre, folks. A GABA and ambient
Gambient.
fusion. Yeah. Yo, it was sick. That was
Yeah.
some fun.
Well, and there's different aspects to that too, right? Like even you and I had talked about like sending each other some stuff, which I'm more than happy to. I think the only reason why I haven't is because I was trying to pull something specific from you of like how can I be helpful to make you successful and like making something come together. That just made it sound like I put it all on you. That's not what I was getting at. It's more of just like I wanted more information before I sent you something. Sorry about that. But in that sense, right? I I think that it's really cool to do that, but to do it with the right people. Like if I'm going to talk to anybody about Psytrance, I'm going to come to you because I'm like that's what you do. That's your thing. I'm not just going to be like, "Yo, I'm going to do this." And actually, I can attest to that because you came in during the stream when I made Psytrance. And you gave me a
Yeah,
lot of
exactly.
you gave me a lot of really helpful advice. So thank you for that.
And the thing is also, like, a lot of people don't realize, like, I don't know if I said this before I got distracted there, is that sometimes if you step too far out of the sort of, I don't want to say comfort zone, but I mean, if you step too far out of the box, like, you can throw away the audience that you've curated. So, like,
Ableton,
take it so
Bitwig,
hard to grow. You know what I mean?
completely started over from Ableton to Bitwig.
I'm seeing a bit of it as well. I'm seeing a bit of it as well.
From
Like a very
Cubase?
big, like, yeah. My Bitwig videos do, like, very badly, but I don't give a fuck. I'm doing it.
I'm so happy that
And
you're on
what'll
Bitwig.
happen is that, like, people will start, like, either leaving or just, like, understanding, okay, he's chosen that, and, like, adapt their ideas to that. Because I mean, like, before, so many people were watching my videos who are on Ableton, and they were like, used to get comments all the time like, I use Ableton, but I still like this video. I use Ableton,
Right,
but I still
yeah.
like this video. I think it's just because it's a drastic change, not like maybe one or two people don't react the same and the algorithm just catches on and things change.
Right.
So what I do with that kind of thing is when I really want to step out, I do it in a live stream, because the live streams don't really, that's not algorithm stuff, you know what I mean? It's the stuff for the people that you know are going to be there, that they're going to support you there. That's your 100. I don't know if you know the whole concept of, like, 100,000, 10,000. Like, you've got 100 like diehards, you got 1,000 like orbiters, and then you got like 10,000 fans. You know what I mean?
And those are the people that
and you got to look after them, like, individually in different ways. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
And I know that you do this too, but something that's really important to me, which we did not do hardly at all today, is, like, if I'm streaming and it's just me, I try to talk to chat almost religiously, because even in some cases I'm more interested in talking to chat than I am in what I'm doing on stream. This is a special case, of course, because you're my guest. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. But having that relationship with people in that sense has been one of the most rewarding and satisfying things, especially, like, I don't know if you still remember, of having, like, nobody in chat to fucking even 16 people, right? I don't care who you are. Thank you all so much for being here. But 5 people, 6 people, 12, 20, doesn't matter. But the fact that people choose to come into your chat or my chat out of their day, they could be doing anything else in the world, and that's where they choose to be. Like, I feel like I owe them something of, like, at least an acknowledgement, right? At least of, hello, thank you for being here, and, like, how are you? And that's something that I always appreciate that you do for my channel a lot, and I feel bad that I don't do the same. It's just I'm usually asleep when you go live. But even still, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming in almost every single time and just being like, hey, what's up? Even if you don't stay, that means the world to me, and I wanted to tell you that in person, and thank you so much for that. But yeah, man, I don't know. I love doing this, and I hope that you still do too. And I say still because you've been doing it a lot longer than me, but the bigger I get, the bigger my channel grows, the more fun I have, and the better that I get at music. Have you had a similar, like, experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to always, like, keep that fun element to it. You know, it's like, I think I'm lucky in the fact that, you know, going back to, like, what I said right at the beginning, in that my mom was an art teacher, and she always taught me that, like, the most important thing you can learn in being creative is to just have fun doing it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how good you are, because she always used to say, like, I'm not good at art. I just enjoy doing it, and I teach people it. You know what I mean? And I enjoy I enjoy teaching people it. So that's why I do it. You know? And I think that inspired me to think, like, you know what? Like, it's just that enjoyment fact. And I'm telling you, your audience will feed off of that energy. If they see you, it's like
Having a good time.
I don't know how many times you go, like, to like festivals and stuff like that, but the most boring thing for me is seeing the DJ just once, just seeing the DJ standing there like he's not even having a good time. And it's like, that gives the impression to me that, like, if he doesn't even like the music he's playing, why should I? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, like, it's so important to see somebody enjoying what they're doing, and that feeds energy in so many different ways. It, like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I was just imagining that, and I was thinking about, like, the interactivity and stuff when I played the set that I did, and ironically enough, my ideal, like, situation for if I were to make somebody play off of my music is two things. I either want people to be tricking to my music, or I want somebody like you standing in the back of the club with a blunt torch going like this with a hat on, just, and everybody's doing the same thing. And if I can make that happen, then I've done my job as a musician. But sorry, that's like just where my head went. But anyways, man, dude, thank you so much for being here. Was there anything else that we didn't cover or that you want to do? Or yo, thank you so much for the follow. I don't know who that was, but I heard it. But yeah, is there anything else that you want to cover?
I think we covered so much. I mean, I'll probably, like, as soon as we get done here, I'll be like, you know what? There was that one thing that I did want to say, but I mean, like, I think we covered such a huge range of stuff.
Yeah, I can always ask more questions.
And we've been blabbering for quite a while. So, yeah.
You are always welcome on my channel. So, and every guest that I've had up to this point, I've said the same thing to you, but you're always welcome on my channel. And I hope that you feel like you've got a second home here, because we all know you and we love having you around. And thank you for being a part of this community. And thank you as well, because I know a lot of your community is in the chat as well. And I really appreciate us kind of having that together. I will be more than happy to do anything collaborative in the future with you that you are interested in. And I just want to continue to have fun.
We'll do that Pimp My Preset, the next series, like me and you, maybe we'll do that, the one that I did with Artifact.
Yeah, I would love maybe
I was just busy like the last few weeks prepping for that gig, so I didn't get a chance to like organize that. And I've also got like content coming up for like the next couple of weeks, so we can plan it for like
just
a month.
let me know
or
your
so.
schedule, because it won't take me long to actually make something. It's more about like when you're ready to kind of do it together or something, or how you want to do that, because that's your idea. And I love that idea. And if you guys didn't know, him and Artifact did this kind of like, what would you call it? It's like a preset challenge almost, where you guys swap presets and then you try to like make something out of it.
Like a patch flip, or like a
patch flip.
Yeah, like a preset remix kind of thing. So it's like I send him presets, he sends me presets. I make a track with the sounds that he sends me. He makes a track with the sounds that I send him. But the catch is that you're in other genres. So like I made sounds for drum and bass, and he made sounds for Psytrance. And I think the takeaway from it is, for example, myself, who I like drum and bass sounds, and I kind of know how to make the sounds. I don't know how to contextualize them very well. And watching his video, he was just like, you take this sound, you do it like this, bump, and then you do a long response sound. And just seeing him quickly contextualize the sounds that I had made was so powerful that I think like other people can learn from this kind of format. So I want to do some more stuff, other people, other genres.
Yeah, I'd like to. A long time ago, we did something on stream a few times where it was like Pimp My Preset, where people would send in, it was during a live stream, but people would send stuff in with Faceplant, and they'd be like, hey, do something cool to it. And I would just sit and work on it, and then I'd give it out to the public, and you know what I mean, post those patches and stuff. And in this particular case, I kind of feel like it's the same thing. And I love to see, like, I think I sent you most of my sounds and stuff already, but I love to see like when I can send something to somebody and you're like, I have an idea for this. And that shit is what like fires me up, because you're like, oh, this is dope, we could do that. And I think that's what that purpose is trying to serve. So yeah, there's no rush to it, but sound of noise. But whenever you're ready for that, just let me know, and we can kind of get that ball rolling. But until then, man, could I ask you for a favor and just stick around for just a couple of minutes before I end stream? For the rest of you guys, thank you so much. Please give a big thanks to Dash. The best way that you can support him is by checking the links in the description. He's also got a Patreon. Subscribe to him. Support this person, because he's here for the community just as I am for you. And those are the kind of people that you want in your circle. At least that's what I would want. Anyways, thank you all so much for being here in the chat. Dash, thank you so much. Stick around for just a minute. And
thanks for having me.
Stream.
And thanks, chat, for being so accommodating.
Hugs, Dash. Much hugs. Much hugs. Peace out, Dash, and I'll